Good evening, Dominica and the wider Caribbean. My name is Kenny Green, and I'm moderating this evening the Dominica Elections Watch, monitoring the election results coming from Dominica today, the 6th of December, 2022. With me tonight, I have a very distinguished panel. To my right, I have Dr. Gerard Jajak, and to my left, I have Mr. Sam Raphael. Virtually, I have journalist Callistra Farrier, and also virtually, I have pollster and known political analyst Peter Wickham. Before I continue, I'd like to get each of my panelists to introduce themselves to the audience, and I know we have a wide audience across the region and in Dominica listening intently. So I'd like to start with Dr. Jean-Jacques. Please introduce yourself and to the audience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Good evening to everybody here and beyond. Dr. Jean-Jacques, well, that's the name that I'm titled in Okari, a whole of PhD in political science. And I love to big up, as we say, my alma mater, the Université Laval from Quebec, Canada. Very proud graduate of Université Laval. I'm happy to be here this evening to discuss on the happenings, current happenings in Dominica.
Great, thank you. Sam?
Yes, good evening, Dominican people at home and abroad, and all of those persons tuning in. This is a very interesting election. I'm Sam Raphael. I'm first and foremost a business person, known mostly for sustainable tourism. And I am also very much into social development. So I guess that's why I'm on the panel doing an analysis from that perspective.
Great, thank you. Callistra? Sorry, Callistra, I think your volume is a bit low, if you can, or you're on mute.
Oh, I was on mute. My apologies. Callistra Farrier, journalist, Grenada. I'm host of the program The Narrative. Looking forward to be part of the discussion this evening.
Thank you. Peter?
Hi, good afternoon, lady and gentlemen, and it's good to be with you and good to be with Dominica again for another election coverage. We've been this path quite a few times, and I'm happy to be part of this distinguished panel. I think we should have some good conversation tonight. The outcome is not likely to be in question. However, there's some interesting analyses and angles that we can take in terms of looking at the outcome. So thanks for the invitation and happy to be with you for the course of the evening.
Great. So we've got a full raft of panelists here, and we've got a very interesting elections to discuss. You know, the first thing I'd like to ask everyone here, and you can individually deal with this, is indications that our turnouts are low. And we have some initial results, which I'll talk to very soon. But does this make the decision to have a snap election? Does it change your perception if the turnouts are low?
Not mine at all. The whole issue of snap election actually for me is a known issue. Some person have sought to describe it as illegal, legitimate, then immoral. I think there's some other terms I might have. It's a non-issue for me. The illegal, the elections, snap or not, the turnout. I think for one, the turnout is what it is right now. We assume, as a matter of fact, that it is low. Because for one, many persons from the United Workers' Party, that is the main opposition party, have been asked to stay away, to boycott the polls. So you already have, logically, a large block of persons who would absent themselves from the vote. In addition to that, the vibes, the feeling on the ground, was among Laborites, members of the incumbent party, was that, well, we have already won. We have 6 seats after nomination day. The opposition is largely staying away. Therefore, why turn out? So I do not see there's a connection between the timing of the election, the call for elections, and the turnout. I don't think there's a connection at all.
Yeah, well, I tend to agree with Dr. Jean-Jacques' position. I would be very surprised if the turnout was high, mainly for the two factors that he mentioned. One, it's the assumption by the ruling party, since the others are boycotting, that they're going to win anyway. So why do I leave my home or leave my job and go vote? And I know we're going to win anyways. And on the other side, even though the message has been mixed at times, they were asked to stay away. So the UWP last election, I think the past three elections, got between the high 30s and low 40s in terms of national polling. So you can assume close to that is going to be out, and then certainly those people on the labor side that have some level of apathy. So I'd be surprised if we have more than half of the numbers that we had the last election.
So let me surprise you guys before I go to Peter and to Callistra. I've just gotten some preliminary results from Soufriere. Denise Charles, 1,245 votes, and 66 independent votes. I have to break it down. I'm not too sure how many independents are in that constituency, but if it's one, it is 66 votes for that person.
What was the voting last election?
The last election, that's a good question. The last election,
the total?
For the total was...
So, sorry, can you just repeat the Soufriere numbers again for Labour?
The Soufriere numbers are 1,245 to Denise Charles and 66 to the independent candidate. Yeah. 66.
Right. I can give you very easily, because the Soufriere numbers in 2019, I think I have it here. Soufriere was 1353.
Oh, Soufriere. So Soufriere.
Yeah, Soufriere was 1353 for the Labour Party.
Yeah.
So if she got 1245, I think that's brilliant. Actually,
that's an incredible turnout, and we also do have preliminaries from La Plaine. And the preliminary from La Plaine is indeed also impressive in that for La Plaine, the prospective candidate for the Labour Party got, Dr. Cassandra Williams got 690 votes, and Jason Fontaine from Team Unity got 29 votes. Now, last election in La Plaine, the Labour Party did, I think, 745 votes. So she's come just below that. So they may be anomalies within the greater picture. 742 votes, I correct myself, in La Plaine last election. So those two seats may be anomalies, but so far this points to an incredible turnout from the Labour voters, irrespective of what you might have suggested, and what I alluded to.
But I think we assume that every election comes with surprises, even though you have the consultants like Peter Wickham and these guys, they give you this good scientific analysis. But I think the surprise here is that the supporters of the Labour Party were motivated to go out to vote, and I think that's the first thing that some of us got wrong.
Well, if I may add, I mean, the overall turnout, I would expect.
Sorry, go ahead.
I would expect to be lower. But I would still expect Labour to do very well in certain constituencies, because throughout the campaign, almost every night, and I pay attention to pretty much every rally, every meeting as best as I could, the rallying cry from Labour was, get out to vote, you must come to vote. Then we had these appeals, and especially in this week, a concentration of appeals, get out to vote. So there was a very, very strong attempt.
So I want to go across to Callistra and Peter. Before I go to you, Callistra, I'm just going to give you the Castle Bruce results. Now, for context, Octavia Alfred, the current MP for that area for the Dominica Labour Party, last election she tallied 842 votes. Today, she has gotten 869 votes. So these turnout numbers, and the independent has gotten 143 votes, the Jenny man.
Can I throw something here before we go? And another thing we have to talk about is the assisting or the transporting or the movement of persons to Dominica to vote. We didn't see it in this election. That wasn't it, and this is very important. So I think the suggestion that the numbers were inflated because people were flown in to vote in the past elections, I think that is now that's shown to be maybe not to be correct.
Sorry, we've got Kalistra and Peter. Kalistra, please give talk about yourself and also your perceptions so far from what we've been feeding you from the results.
Well, I mean, it's what three seats so far. So we'd have to wait and see how the others turn out. But from what you're showing here, the turnout that certainly I expected seems to be a bit high. I thought that complacency would rule the day for Dominicans, given that this was almost a shoe-in with no opposition really in the elections. So certainly those three are showing that people turned out there based on the numbers from the past, the last poll. That the comparison. It's interesting that the numbers are that high. Let's see how the others
play out, yes.
Come out.
And for the
as I was asking you before we came on. That is it what was the pattern for those particular the particular constituency that we talked about before? I think was it Green Bay or anyhow one of them that
we gave one polling station for Grand Bay. Well, Grand Bay is a Labour stronghold, so the expectation is one that they would win, but also that it could be that complacency would set in simply because it's assumed that they would win. However, I'll give you a few more results that are coming in. For one of the polling stations in Roseau North has been reported. Miriam Blanchard, who is the prospective Labour candidate, has 194 votes in number one polling station. Boston has 11 and Nicholas 11. In Roseau Central, polling booth MO1-A1, Melissa Popon-Skerritt has 67 votes. Jason John Baptist 1 and Richards 1, Kashmir Richards, I believe, 3, sorry, with 1 rejected ballot. And in Roseau South, we have in Harlem Plaza 002-4, we have Shakira Lockhart at 36 votes, Wayne Norde at 4 votes, I think Mr. Davidson at 7 votes with 2 rejected ballots. So the trend is that in most places, people are coming out to vote. I have got a whisper that the Labour Party has lost Salisbury. So whoever the independent there has won in Salisbury. So that trend continues. So far, the results seem to be pretty consistent and surprising with the numbers turning out. One other district for Roseau Central, MO6-11, that is featuring names F to M. Melissa Popon-Skerritt, 84 votes. Jason John Baptist, 7 votes. Kashmir Richards, 2 votes and 3 rejected ballots. So it's in Salisbury, and these are preliminary numbers that have to be confirmed. In Salisbury, the Labour Party candidate got 463 votes, and the independent there got 617 votes. So obviously, there must have been some rallying behind the independent from the opposition voters. So these numbers seem to suggest that this is an engaged election in a different way than we expected. Peter, please come in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to get over the shock of Salisbury. It's a tiny constituency, and it's one that you were looking. I think in the last election, the Labour Party didn't do much worse than it did on this occasion. But clearly, as you said, there was a motivation on the other side. I'm a bit stunned, that it wasn't a complete clean sweep. And I mean, it suggests that perhaps in some of the areas where the UWP is stronger, like in in Marigot, I was thinking for sure, it might very well be an interesting outcome there. So That result is surprising, but otherwise everything that we're seeing is consistent. And I'm agreeing entirely with what the others have been saying. My expectation would have been that we were looking at something like a 40% turnout or less. I thought maybe even 20%. And I think the key point that you were making is the last election in Dominica. The voter turnout in the last election in Dominica was 53%. In a situation where historically the voter turnout is around 53%, one would expect that in an election that suffers a boycott, it would fall even lower. So it would be even lower than 53%. So the expectation is that it would be lower than was the case with the other two countries. Now, I was using as my indicators Jamaica in 1983, where there was a boycott, and also Trinidad and Tobago in 1971, where there was a boycott. In Trinidad and Tobago, the voter turnout was 33%. In Trinidad, however, there were candidates in almost all of the constituencies, regardless of the fact that there was a boycott, because the opposition decided on the boycott after candidates were declared. So essentially, they declared themselves as candidates and then told people not to vote for them because they weren't participating. Jamaica was more clear, where the People's National Party did not have any candidates at all, and they came up with something like a 43% turnout. It would appear as though, and in those places, certainly in Jamaica, the voter turnout in the election before was higher. So it appears as though you guys are doing reasonably well in terms of voter turnout, and the fact that the Dominica Labour Party actually lost a constituency is compelling evidence that Dominicans were engaged with this election, and I think that we can begin to ask questions about whether or not the boycott was wise, because clearly there would have been a mood in some instances that would have given the UWP at least back the strength it had originally. And that was fairly compelling evidence. But I mean, it's too early to say that yet. But certainly for now, what's clear to me is that you're seeing a level of engagement, and then in the other constituencies that have been declared, we're seeing that the Labour Party seems to have been able to bring out effectively all of its votes. Even in the one that it lost, they still seem to have been able to bring out a significant share, probably about 80% of the persons who voted in the last election were voting in this election. Now, if you're going to argue that the Labour Party can only be responsible for Labour Party votes, I think that's pretty impressive, that in an election where people are saying to your supporters not to come, that they can still bring out about 80% of their votes, and that's quite good.
So before you jump in, Sam, we got another result, or interim result. The Grand Fork constituency, Greta Roberts, 571 votes, and independent 174 votes. And in 2019, Greta Roberts' results were 601 votes. So the fall off is not high, is not big. It's a 95% turnout versus the 2019 results. And let me repeat that again. The Grand Fork constituency, Greta Roberts, 571 votes, and the independent, 174 votes. My apologies, guys, if I don't name the independent, but I don't have the names right in front of me right now, but you can tag them, the data next to them. So that is preliminary final for Grand Fork.
Going back to the Salisbury results, this I think is great relief for supporters of the opposition. I mean, initially the whole mantra, it was very emotional. No elections, no reform, no reform, no election. But in the waning days, you got to feel the sense of unease among persons that support the opposition, that they will not even be at the table in Parliament to debate the very reform package that they were demanding and what's going to happen. And so I think this brings relief for a large segment of Dominicans. And even though it's not winning the government, which they certainly didn't expect, I think the victory in Salisbury is indeed to knight the opposition. I think supporters are going to get a good night's sleep, because for them this is important. But I think it will force people to ask the question, what if they had contested? What if they had really gone out and contested? Maybe they could have really picked up some seats and given their new leader really a good platform to launch from. So I think there will be a lot of questioning.
So I have a question that follows on for that from the panel. There is a paper that I have found, Threatened but Participate, Why Election Boycotts Are a Bad Idea, by Matthew Franco, who is a foreign policy expert from Brookings. And it suggested that even when turnout is low, as was in Mali in 1997 and Jamaica in 83, that boycotts rarely ever work in the way oppositions intend and in fact can damage their cause for a long time. Do you think that this will be the case, that will be a result from these elections, that it will damage the cause of the opposition?
Samuel, Kenny,
Okay, sorry, just one more interruption on results. Everyone's listening. Roseau South, this is with 2 polling stations to go. The Labour candidate, Shakira Lockhart, has 1,509 votes. To the independent, 324 votes. I assume the 324 would be an amalgamation of Wayne Nordy and the other independent, but we'll break it down. We'll break it down later. But so far, with 2 polling stations to call, 1,509 votes for Shakira Lockhart.
Okay, thank you, Kenny. You asked essentially whether the boycott is by the United Workers' Party is in its interest. But I want to take that question, but I can't wait to piggyback on a conversation that was started by Peter and Sam. Is that the issue in Salisbury and Marigot? We shouldn't forget, and Sam hinted at that. The opposition should now be happy. Sam has actually accepted that the independent, quote unquote, in Salisbury may not have been so independent after all, but maybe a blue independent, as in the United Workers' Party independent. And we have some of these independents, they are not truly.
Sorry to interrupt you, just an update on the last result I gave for Roseau South with 2 polling stations in Newtown to go. The actual count is 1,599 votes to Shakira Lockhart and 324 to the independents. Callistra, are you there?
Yes,
Okay.
I am here.
Okay, what's your feedback so far from what you've heard?
I mean, the Salisbury result, and I was going to ask Peter whether or not that actually happened, because Peter and I were talking about the Dominica elections on my program just yesterday. Whether or not that kind of adds, well, I don't want to use the word legitimacy because the elections were legitimate. Does it add something to it, Peter, where we are talking about the turnout as well, that if the turnout is below a particular level, it puts certain flavor on the results. Does the independent winning that seat up the ante a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think it does, and it ups the ante in several ways. And I want to combine that response with a question that was asked just now about the impact of the boycott and whether it was a success or failure. I mean, I was one that said initially that certainly if I were advising the opposition, I would tell them not to boycott. But my reasons are very different, because my thing is, if you don't have the resources to fight an election, why fight it? You could probably make a moral stand, which is what they did, as opposed to making yourself look foolish. The reality is that this evidence suggests that they probably would have not looked any more foolish than they did in 2019. So perhaps they could have thrown their hat in the ring. But what has happened now is that you have an independent candidate or 2 that would appear to have been able to make the mark, and you have an ongoing electoral reform process, and those guys can claim legitimacy. You have a leader of the opposition who will be a legitimate leader of the opposition. And it is difficult now to ask yourself whether the UWP narrative will continue to hold sway with voters in a situation where you have an alternative voice, and that person is a legitimate opposition voice that will sit in the Parliament of Dominica, in the Commonwealth of Dominica, and will be able to take positions on various issues. The reality now is that the UWP can even be further marginalized in terms of conversations. There's no basis on which the electoral reform needs to acknowledge anything that's being said by the unofficial opposition anymore, because you have an official opposition, and I think that their views and opinions will be of greater significance going forward. So it really can be a dangerous outcome for the UWP, because they miss the opportunity to sit at a table at a time when it is going to be pretty important going forward. The party is going through a state of flux. I have my reservations about the wisdom of the choice that they made for leadership. And the question is, how can this individual now begin to steer a ship and be able to say that, look, the UWP is the legitimate alternative voice, when you have people sitting in parliament and basically are legitimate opposition, it's going to be fascinating to see how they will negotiate, because now the UWP had to negotiate with them.
Yes.
In the past, a big part of the reason why the Labour Party did so well was because Dominica had Freedom and they also had UWP. Freedom and UWP are out of the picture, but you now have a new political force that has effectively 5 years to organize themselves properly and to say, look, we could make something of this, and to lay claim on a vote, which further splits the opposition even further. So
So sorry
fascinating
to
stuff politically, and I think that it's a win in a sense for the Dominica Labour Party tonight in more ways than one.
Yes, thank you, Peter, for that commentary. I just want to update you on Salibia results, preliminary result from Salibia, that Kozia Frederick, the incumbent, has reportedly won with 1,008 votes versus 394 votes for the independent candidate. What these results also seem to suggest, this to me is the big takeaway so far, is something you mentioned earlier, that the narrative that the elections were essentially being staged in the past and won primarily on the back of overseas voters coming in.
Case, yeah.
That narrative is being pretty much
Decimated.
dispelled and destroyed right now.
The narrative was never convinced in any case.
Okay, so we also have an update from Marigot. I know Peter will be interested in that. Currently, with 3 more stations to go, the DLP has 305 votes, and
Carissa.
and Tony Charles has 383 votes. So he is leading, the independent is leading the DLP candidate by over 70 votes, with 3 more stations to go.
Well, that's exactly the point I was trying to make earlier. Salisbury and Marigot and certain pockets of Rosa North, they are entrenched voters for the United Workers' Party. Their voices in the past days were, let us deny the DLP that victory, that 21-21 that they want. Let us get out and vote, while some persons of the party say, no, don't go to vote. Some say, no, let's get there and deny them another victory. So I'm not surprised that...
So does this somehow invalidate the main opposition's cry of no reform, no election, because their stalwarts have seemingly either deliberately as a strategy or going against the party edict have basically contested with vigor these elections in both of these constituencies?
Can I suggest that many Dominicans will be surprised that, not that they had the strength in those constituencies, but that the people were disciplined enough to go out and vote, because the conflicting messages that the opposition gave, I'm surprised that the people actually did go out and support. So I think that's important. And then you have to think they have to lament tonight, because what if they had contested in other areas? They may have had tremendous strength. I mean, 2019, they held 6 seats, remember? They lost 3, maybe largely because of this damaging Al Jazeera report and the behavior before the election. But if they had in fact contested in the seats that they're marginal, you've got about 8 labor strongholds in Dominica. The rest are 2 United Workers' Party strongholds. The rest could be contested. What would they have done in Roseau North? What would they have done in those other constituencies? They must be holding their heads tonight and saying maybe they made a mistake.
So this is a question for Callistra and Peter. What does the boycott of the election in Dominica and what you are seeing so far does it have any repercussions for the rest of the region and any other jurisdictions where there may be similar dynamics, where oppositions are looking at this election and saying to ourselves, do we hold out and try and withdraw legitimacy from the electoral process? And now this has been smashed here. Is this affecting any kind of viewpoint like this in other areas?
Well, I can't speak specifically to any particular territory, but what I would say is, because of the risk of becoming irrelevant with this boycott, as Peter talked about, them now just not having a seat at the table, I think that's a lesson for any other party who that is considering boycotting an election, looking at how it played out in Dominica, how the UWP was not successful
Sorry to
in getting
interrupt you,
this
Calistra. Just
is
sorry to interrupt you. Just breaking news here. A final count preliminary from St. Joseph. The DLP candidate 1,014 votes, and the other candidate.
That's Kasani Laville?
No. That's
That's,
a
yes.
young
Darren, yes, Darren. That's correct.
I'll pull up Darren Lloyd had 1,014 votes, and the independent candidate, 146 votes. Well, they say other. I know Dr. Pascal pulled out, so that would be between Tiani Bihanzin,
Team Unity had a candidate there
yes,
also.
Ferdinand Germain and Clevian Roll, who I think is the Team Unity candidate. Between those three, they would have tallied 146 votes versus the DLP candidate, Darren Lloyd, and his count of 1,014 votes. So again, another resounding victory, and pretty impressive numbers. I must say, I'm very, very surprised by the numbers.
Yeah. If I may, Kenny, I want to add my voice to what Kalisha was saying with regards to the boycott by the United Workers' Party. That to me is going to go down in history as one of the worst mistakes of the party. It has made many catastrophic mistakes, I think, in the past. This one, where number one, it was already, on shaky grounds with its leadership. It now had an opportunity to mobilize its persons around one or two themes, get their voices together, and get a foot or 2 or 3 feet into Parliament, and then continue to build and rise from that platform. They chose to absent themselves, number one. Number two, they also angered a large percentage of their voters by calling for a boycott.
So I have another update here from, and hold that thought, you can continue. From Roseau South, with one polling station to go, Shakira Lockhart has 1,657 votes against 325 votes for the independent in that constituency.
It would be interesting to see how the independents go in some of those constituencies. For instance, you have, I think, 4 of the candidates, they're independents, but they're youth supporting this Moon Siwe movement from Newtown. And it would be interesting to see how Bourgeois did versus Attorney Norde. And then it would be interesting to see how Team Unity did as a new political party also. So these are a lot of little backstories that I think we should look at.
Just for the viewers who are asking, how does, for example, the turnout for Shakira in Roseau South compare to what happened previously in 2019? In 2019, the Labour Party tallied, Shakira Lockhart tallied 2,194 votes. And bear in mind, the Roseau South constituency is possibly the largest, if not one of the largest constituencies, and it's a wide constituency. So she tallied 2,194 votes, and so far in these elections, she has 1,657 votes. So that is pretty impressive, given one more polling station to be called in. And I want to, with Roseau Central, so far we have DLP 1,023 votes, Team Unity 41 votes, and Independent 48 votes. And again, let me just go back to the last elections in Roseau Central and tell you that Labour in 2019 got 1,063 votes.
And how many did they do this time?
1,023 votes. So the turnout
it's a 40 vote difference,
has been incredible. Now, I want to continue something here, because the current leader of the opposition, and for those who don't know, Peter and Calistra, the leader of the party, in the public domain has said, and multiple times I've heard it, that he is essentially going to ask the international community to declare this government a rogue government because it does not reflect the will of the people. My point here is this. The fact that both Salisbury and Marigot have been retained, so people have participated in the elections from all sides,
and at the same time that the turnout has been much higher than anticipated. And on top of that, you've got election observers here. You've got 4 electoral observer groups, CARICOM, OAS, the Commonwealth, and a group from Latin America.
That's right.
That seems to me that it really is throwing the cat amongst the pigeons, in that what you're saying, Jared, seems to be almost prophetic, in that the opposition may have shot themselves in the foot by extricating themselves from the political debate, and as Peter said, giving themselves a hill to climb.
But look what they have also done. They have created a path for Team Unity, TUD, and within TUD there are also persons who might want to remain with Team Unity or venture on their own. They have also cleared a path from this child's person from Marigot, who seems to be leading. He is not totally alien from the scene. The history show that he has a history of contact with the United Workers' Party. But what the absence of the UWP does is it clears the path for more voices, new voices, hopefully, new voices and new ways of doing things for Dominica. That can augur well, but I don't see it really helping the United Workers' Party.
So we have results from Grand Bay. So in 2019, the now deceased Edward Regis from the DLP tallied 1,532 votes. Currently, I think this may be final, but it's a preliminary. Dr. Vince Henderson has 1,144 votes versus the independent 27 votes and rejected 19 votes. So again, Peter and Callistra, the numbers continue to defy all of our expectations and kind of put a question mark, a huge question mark on the opposition's boycott of the elections.
But you also notice, Kenny, that the number of spoiled ballots and penitentiary, they are not that high. You know. Actually, they are lower in many regards than before.
Yes.
But you know that was part of the call. Go there and spoil a ballot. That was what many supporters of the opposing parties were instructed to do. So I'm also looking out for that as well to see how persons from these parties would have responded to that call. And so far I'm not saying the trend shows that they have ignored that call.
Yeah. Well, other than the boycott issue, there are lots of other issues with this election that maybe we should touch on. And I think, I don't know, Kenny, you're leading the panel, but I think there are a number of other things too. One of the issues is the Prime Minister did indicate his intention to step down. How soon do we project that this will happen? I don't think we can tell. And when that happens, who will be stepping in the shoes and so on? These are issues, I think, that are on the minds of the Dominican
Well, the Prime
people.
Minister, actually, to be fair, the Prime Minister indicated on multiple occasions that April 2024 will be his departure date. And he was very emotional recently in essentially declaring that this was his final elections as a parliamentarian.
Correct.
So these indications, and I was going to come to this question to everyone here, is, if that is the case, if this is indeed his swan song as a parliamentarian, will the story of this election, more than anything, be about this in retrospect, or is it going to be more about the opposition effectively disenfranchising themselves?
And then maybe Peter Wickham would probably.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was anxious to get back in relation to some of the other issues. I'm not comfortable discussing matters of the Prime Minister's departure just yet. I feel that that's probably a conversation that we should have on another night, and we should focus on this time. And I mean, the surprise that this is presented as. We have a comparative base in terms of elections that were boycotted. Unfortunately, this cannot be considered a boycott election because you had candidates that were running, you had clearly a competitive environment, and unlike 71 in Trinidad and also 70 and 83 in Jamaica, you had an alternative party that was able to bring candidates to the winning point. So it really, when the history books look back on this election, it doesn't appear to be an election in which there was a boycott. it appears to be an election in which UWP was just not ready to present candidates, didn't present candidates, and as a result was found wanting. And the point that was made just now is very, very compelling. You now have representation from a new party that will be part of the conversation and that will insist that they sit at the table. So the question of what happens in Marigold, that has always been the safest seat for the UWP. The presumption is that one of the new leaders would want to have that seat, and that certainly the old leader would also have wanted to hold on to it if he wanted to continue in politics. But guess what? Today, he's no longer leader of the opposition. He's no longer MP. And there's a person that will be holding that seat that is not him. He has to fight to get it back.
Yes.
So there will now have to be conversations that the UWP would prefer not to have with people that are not part of the decision that was taken to boycott this election. And I think this is what makes it so fascinating. But I really thought that tonight we would be saying, okay, how do we compare this election with the last one that was a boycott election? The observers have their work to do, and the observers basically have to look to see whether the election was free and fair. Clearly it was. And it was competitive. Competitive is a plus, is a bonus, but it doesn't necessarily have to be competitive once it was a freedom and a fairness to this election. And clearly the observers will have to report that it was. The position that the opposition will take in relation to that, though, would not surprise you, because you recall for the last few elections, they were arguing that even though they were observers, that the observers' conclusions that the elections were free and fair were incorrect conclusions, because the elections were really not free and fair. One of them, Dr. Fontaine, said to Callistra a few days ago that the last 4 elections in Dominica were fraudulent. In all of those instances, observers said that the last 4 elections were free and fair elections. So I would expect that on this occasion, they will have issues with the conclusions of the observers as they did in the past. But I think that the public, looking on at this and seeing it, will find this to be somewhat amusing, because you're finding a political organization that has been caught out, so to speak, because they were peddling a narrative that just is not flying. And Dominicans have surprised me yet again. The question as to the opposition strategy of doing this, as Callistra was saying, clearly it's not a strategy that has worked, and it's not likely to be a good strategy going forward. I think that the Grenada example, the decommission strategy, where you look for someone fresh and new, and you insert that person into the politics, and then you're able to effectively peddle a change narrative, to me would be the solution that I think would have worked better in the case of Dominica. And I think what happened this year is that we had 2 elections, one in which Grenada has given us a clear direction in terms of what should happen, and Dominica has given us a clear direction in terms of what is not going to work.
So I have an update, a preliminary final for Roseau Central. The incumbent, Melissa Popon-Skerritt, has 1,023 votes. Team Unity Dominica, 41 votes, and Independent, 48 votes. I assume the Independent is Jason John Baptist.
Yeah.
Following from your point, Peter, and to talk to something local to Dominica, I can ask the Dominicans on this panel. I've always questioned this idea that the elections are illegitimate in Dominica simply because certain people feel that the decks are stacked. I seem to remember in 2014 that the largest constituency at the time, the largest majority seat for the Labour Party, the Roseau South seat, was overturned by a newcomer on the UWP side. I can't remember the numbers, I have them here, but the point is that this was someone who hit the road hard, Joshua Francis, and he won the seat. At the time, it was the biggest majority seat for Labour in all of the constituencies. Now, when you add this historical record to the fact that the numbers are so big for Labour without any question of overseas voters coming in, it seems to suggest the narrative that somehow the elections are staged or stacked because people are being flown in and all that kind of stuff. It seems to me that narrative looks a bit weak right now.
I'll tell you something, Kenny. I absolutely never accepted the narrative. I always thought it was a farce, a red herring. United Workers' Party is very adept. It has been very adept at seeking at seeking to hold somebody or something else responsible for its failings.
Okay.
This,
Sorry to interrupt you, Jared. We have live from the electoral office. We have Hassan Robinson and Kiwana from DBS. Hi guys, Kiwana Wilson. Please, I'm not too sure if I can hear your audio, but if you could please speak up or come off mute if you're on mute. Sorry, your audio is pretty bad, Kiwana. Can you try and switch off the audio and switch it back on? She doesn't seem to be hearing us. We'll come back to them. Okay, we'll come back to them. So, Kalistra, I wanted your feedback on the numbers so far, and also, I mean, you spoke to it a bit earlier, but from the outside, I mean, the rest of the Caribbean are tuning into this broadcast, and I think the intention, supposedly from the opposition, was that to boycott the election was to delegitimize it. How do you feel now, given what you're seeing going on? What is your view as a journalist in Grenada, who, by the way, I have to commend you, you've been kind of on top of the Dominica elections and politics in Dominica for some time now?
Well,
Calistra's been on top of all of them, huh? All of them.
Yes.
with the help of your analysis, Peter. You know, from the outside looking in, it's for me personally, it just did not seem like it was making sense. The decisions did not seem to be being made by a political party because of the reasons that were being advanced. The boycotting the election was not going to take away its legitimacy. The Prime Minister, incumbent Prime Minister, obviously did not breach any of your constitutional provisions in calling the snap election. And they did not seem to care about the irrelevance that they were courting by staying out of the elections. And now you're saying that they helped the independents and the opposition, the other opposition, to participate in the elections, which just does not seem to make a lot of sense. You basically handed the prize and the seat at the table to someone else, and you being the main and largest opposition party. You know, people looking out, the reaction that I got from people, let me tell you about that now, was people were amused by the UWP position. And I think that people understood very well what was happening. Although the issue of electoral reform remains a point of interest for people, people are not dismissing the need for electoral reform in Dominica. And I just want to add here that we were talking about the departure of Prime Minister Skerritt in 2.5 years, I think it is, he said. And that, as I agree with Peter, let's not talk about that now. He's about to start a new term. But what I want to ask, and for the others on the panel, the Dominicans on the panel, is, do you believe that the Prime Minister is going to use electoral reform to establish his legacy? I mean, going out in 2.5 years without having solidified electoral reform in Dominica, how do you think that can possibly impact on his legacy?
You want to go ahead?
I would be very surprised if the Prime Minister doesn't seize this moment. I mean, I think he has nothing to lose and everything to gain, and Dominica and the Labour Party and everyone to continue this process and to conclude it if he's indeed going to depart on that date. It also, you know, the opposition party, we talked about their loss in that, you know, they don't really have a seat at the table, at least known now, and so on. But it may be the best thing that happened to them, because a lot of people in the opposition party itself and in the general opposition were not happy with the direction of the old opposition. And this is an opportunity for them to basically start from scratch and to go forward, and it forced their hands in a good direction. They can see by the winners, that there's a way in which they can, the Labour Party and Roosevelt Skerrit is not invincible. You just have to get out there and convince people and start a new conversation. So I think this today is a victory for a lot of the supporters of the United Workers' Party that were not happy with the party and the direction they were going, and it presents an opportunity for a new beginning. I think that's good.
Well,
It's also a reset
Absolute
for them.
reset, and I think they, I think, regardless how we feel, I think they are victors tonight.
Go ahead.
Well, hold on, Sam. I mean, it's only going to be a reset if the new leadership that they voted in is actually going to break from the past. I am not so sure that they have done a reset. I will give them some time to see exactly what direction they take, because the current leadership, the new head of the party, we know him. He has served in parliament already. We know what he delivers. We know his style. We know he doesn't have the temperament to be a national leader. We know he doesn't have the national appeal. We know he's thin-skinned. I don't know that.
I don't know that.
I know that because I have been paying attention to him.
So Gerard, just hold on one second, Dr. Jajak. Callistra asked a pointed question about do we think the electoral reform is still going to be on the agenda for the PM? I want to just answer that in one particular way. There are two separate issues here. The Dominica Labour Party do not associate the integrity of the elections with the modernizing of the electoral processes and systems that constitute reform. The United Workers' Party believes that if the system is modernized, they will win. This election so far seems to be smashing that on the head already. So in that case, not participating has actually left them open to ridicule, so to speak, for that viewpoint. The systems in Dominica, we believe, work, but has to be updated, okay? And the two are mutually exclusive. I mean, that's just the point. When you if you look statistically at the numbers, yes, the voting list needs to be cleaned, but the percentage of people voting in every election cycle, give or take new registrations, remains the same. No dead people are walking dead to the polling stations, as part of a fraud process. And this election is actually debunking that. So it's harmful to the narrative that the UWP are presenting. And in fact, had they participated, they could have probably kept that argument up. But they can't, because...
I will agree that the Labour Party is not going to move away from electoral reform. As a matter of fact, they're on record. The party is on record in the last years as having moved towards electoral reform, not in the large scale that the opposition party was asking for, but there have been efforts towards a national identification card. There have been some funds spent by the government to facilitate reforms by the Electoral Commission. In addition to that, the bills were taken to Parliament. There was a debate that had started, and then there was a riot outside because the opposition party opposed. There was injunction. So the party has already been doing stuff, and I believe the party would continue, especially right now. A lot is at stake with the electoral reform.
Well, you jumped one of my questions, but I want to ask the Peter and Callistra one after the other. I mean, does this election affect the psyche of how other Caribbean jurisdictions see the electoral process? And I'll explain myself. I mean, Barbados had a snap election, and further afield, Canada had one, a year ago. And none of these elections were deemed as constitutionally wrong. But does it put under the microscope, in many ways, the lack of knowledge of so many citizens have of the Constitution and the powers vested in the prime ministers under the current first-past-the-post system that's prevalent in the Caribbean? Is there responsibility for the governments to make people more aware of the civics, the Constitution? Because it seems that Caribbean people are more tuned into how the U.S. system of government works, by following Fox and CNN and overseas elections, than what holds locally in our elections regionally. Because as you know, Peter, as you know, Callistra, all of our prime ministers can call elections at their whim on the basis of their prerogative. And I've heard the adage that the prime minister put forward that he does not know of any jurisdiction where there's an obligation of the prime minister to pick up the phone and call the opposition and say, hey guys, are you ready? I want to call an elections. Are you guys ready? So that I can, make it a fair and balanced playing field. So guys, tell me what you think, if that's something that you see that we need further education.
If he could pick up the phone and call, he certainly wasn't going to be calling them this. Called it because he understood that they were not ready as well. But I think more than the education of the people on civics and the constitution of their countries, I think what this demonstrates is a need for reform in these territories to have fixed date elections, fixed terms, and fixed dates for elections. We had that as part of our referendum in Grenada. I think Peter likes to bring that up as well when we chat. That we voted, that's one of the things we voted against. But then even here in Grenada, when a Prime Minister, opposition leader, Dr. Keith Mitchell, called elections a year or so ahead of time, there were grumblings and complaints because the NDC appeared as if they were not yet ready. They soon turned that around, but there were complaints about him, calling it when the party seemed to still be in pieces. And you hear the same complaint in Dominica now that it's not legitimate and rogue elections and all of that. But what it does is, but people understood, and people I've spoken to understand that the elections were not, there was no breach in calling an early election. And the fact is that he could have called it 6 months after that mandate in 2019. But so yes, of course, people need to be educated more on these things. However, the real need what that points out is that we need reform. Particularly on the fixed date thing. Yeah.
No, I support the call for reform. I am a known supporter of fixed term for the prime minister, fixed date for the elections, and term limits for prime minister. Those are two things that I support. But my point is always made that even as I support them, I acknowledge the fact that until it's in the constitution, there's nothing that we can do about it. We have to live with our system. We have to embrace it. And I also point to the Grenada situation where a majority of people in the public of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique rejected both of those ideas. So clearly, my views are not necessarily the views of people in the majority. I don't know what Dominicans think of those things. It isn't so much a lack of understanding and education. I think there's a lot of mischievousness on part of various people who are in the public domain and reporting. Look, I heard colleagues of mine at the University of the West Indies, or former colleagues, because I don't work there anymore, suggesting that there was something inappropriate about the prime minister calling the election when everyone knows that he has the right to call the election early. You are giving people the opportunity to vote more frequently than 5 years, when the constitution limits your calling an election outside of 5 years. So you're saying you're going to vote in 3. It was done in Barbados, it was done in Grenada, it was done in Trinidad and Tobago, it was done in Jamaica years ago. So many times you've had snap elections called. Now we understand that this is the prerogative of the prime minister. How then can there even be a conversation about people suggesting that it was vindictive and it was wicked because he did not pick up the phone and call the opposition? He knew the opposition was vulnerable and he called the election. And my question is, what is the responsibility of the prime minister? He has a responsibility to Dominica. He has a responsibility to Dominica Labour Party. And if he believes that the DLP is the best thing for Dominica, then he needs to call the election at a point in time when he believes the DLP will prevail. And the fact is that the decision clearly strategically was a good one because it has put the Dominica Labour Party on a good footing for 5 years. And you can rest assured that the new prime minister, whoever it is, when he comes and he takes over, he will not have any pressure on him to call an election early.
He or she.
The government is there. He has a full 5 years. And my sense is that will also deal a blow to the UWP that may have thought that they could rally to get a new government in place to get another election fairly soon. So I think in both instances it has served. But I do feel the issue for me is the nuisance that has been created of persons in the public domain peddling this narrative about illegitimacy and so on, and suggesting that there was something untoward about the prime minister calling an election, using the power that the constitution gives to him to call an election more frequently than every 5 years. The other thing I wanted to comment quickly on, though, is the electoral reform initiative. I was involved in the electoral reform in St. Kitts and Nevis a few years ago. Denzel Douglas won 3 elections. He had electoral reform, and then he won a 4th election. And one of the things I discovered during that process, it was quite useful. All of the issues that you have in Dominica, you had in St. Kitts and Nevis. So the electoral list was bloated. In the case of Barbados, it's the same case. The electoral list is bloated in Barbados. It's bloated in St. Lucia. It's not bloated in Antigua and Barbuda because they have been able to clean theirs up. It's bloated in Guyana, where you had to change the government the other day. So the electoral list is bloated in many instances, and it's not the end of the world. But for some strange reason, that is peddled as a reason why an election is flawed because you have a bloated list. The other thing is the overseas voters. That is a conversation Dominicans have to have. And I saw the way it happened in St. Kitts and Nevis, where they had overseas voters. The overseas voters were, essentially embraced as part of the system going forward. And now they have a legitimate system that allows people to be domiciled locally and resident overseas. Dominica may very well decide to go that way, because if they don't go that way, essentially what they're doing is creating disenfranchising people
Correct.
who were on the voters list. And that's a whole different conversations that Dominica will need to have. So I do feel that this presumption that the voter electoral reform will remove the whole idea of persons resident overseas, it may very well legitimize it even further, as was done in St. Kitts and Nevis. So those issues are not unique to Dominica. And I've always been of the opinion that those issues are not going to make a difference. So we do polls. The polls have showed consistently that the Dominica Labour Party was preferred, and it's been reflected in the election. So to me, there's no evidence of fraud.
Okay, thank you, Peter. We're going to try and go to the electoral office to get results, updated results. Kiwana and Hassan, can you hear us?
Okay, we on now.
Yes, you are on, please.
Ok, nous actuellement ça dit que nous tapons résultat à lot constituency, ça c'est constituency Salisbury. Nous ça dit que candidat indépendant tapé à ce Jesma Paul tapé 617 votes, avec Lindsay Frank pour Labour Party Dominic tapé 463 votes. Dans constituency Salisbury, candidat indépendant gagné l'élection là et puis 617 votes. Jesma Paul avait Lindsay Frank pour Labour Party Dominic 463 votes. Hassan?
Yes, like indicated before, Salisbury constituency independent candidate Jesma Paul got 617 votes. Lindsay Frank 463. Again, those numbers are 617 to Jesma Paul and 463 to Lindsay Frank. Back to main studios.
Thank you very much. So we have confirmation of Salisbury. By the way, guys.
They're coming on now.
By the way, guys, Peter and Callistra, you would have heard that commentary was in both Creole and English. I could see Peter for one hot second had a little look of bewilderment on his face, but I understand you're in a francophone country yourself right now, so you should be at least have a little comfort with that. So
I was able to pick it up, yes.
The independent candidate in Salisbury, Jesma Paul, got 617 votes, and the DLP got 463 votes. Now, I'm going to look right now at the previous 2019 votes in Salisbury, and the Salisbury votes in 2019, Hector John got 866 votes versus 617 votes for Jesma Paul. And the DLP in 2019 got 534 votes from Nichols Esprit. In this case, they've gotten 463 votes. So it looks clear to us here that obviously UWP voters jumped on the bandwagon of Jesma Paul as an independent, and whether it was silently calculated behind the scenes or a disregard of the call to ignore the elections, it has validated the stance of having an election.
It also seems that the Labour voters didn't turn out this time around to vote. because fewer of them registered for Lindsay Frank.
It may have been complacency. Maybe they were rope-a-doped by the thought that the opposition
Yeah.
or the independent candidate would not have gotten as much votes.
Yeah.
And some of these are new candidates, and let's not discount the impact of the candidate as it relates to the turnout.
Yeah.
Because in some situations, you find, as we saw in Dr. Williams in La Plaine, the people were motivated to go and vote for her. In some constituencies where we saw a sharper drop by the Labour candidate, they still won. They were not that strong in the constituency. So that's also a factor, and it's not just, I think, the overall attrition because of this situation.
Just checking with the electoral office. Have you got any updates? Kiwana, Hassan, have you guys got any updates? Have you got any updates from the electoral office?
Ask Dupe if you have anything official from Marigot.
Yeah, no, we haven't got any updates. It's pretty active over there.
But there's,
Jared, please go ahead.
if I may, you launched a topic earlier, and Sam actually hinted on it, which is the issues, the issues other than legitimacy, etc., that surround this election. And our colleagues, Wickham and Kalisha, they seem to shy away from it because that question was tied towards Mr. Skerritt's tenure, remaining years. Well, I don't want to touch exactly on his remaining years, but the issue of the secondary issues, they are very important. Because one, of course, is the boycott. What could that mean for the United Workers' Party? We have to remember also there's the question of how does the Labour Party in government, we're assuming that they're going to form a government, how does this young team manage the portfolio that the Prime Minister has been detailing in the past few weeks? He is a leader who is, let's say, in his heyday, ready to retire, but he now has a very young, mostly young, mostly green, inexperienced team that has to deliver. So it is also going to be shaky grounds for the Labour Party. And I'm not sure the Labourites themselves are aware of that. Shaky grounds for workers, shaky grounds for TUD for sure, and all the independents who are coming in, but also for the Labour Party. And considering the fact that the Labour Party, statistically, should have plummeted in the last, in the last 2019.
So sorry, we have got an update from Marigot, a preliminary final that's ahead of the electoral office themselves. But the numbers are for the Labour candidate, Dr. Gregory Revere. He has 384 votes, and for the independent, 493 votes. So again, we're seeing the trend continuing that opposition strongholds, independent or not, are holding clear of the Dominica Labour Party. Going on to I wanted to ask that, or I wanted to get the views of Kalistra and Peter on this, but we have results so far from, I'm not sure if it's a final, from Roseau North. Blanchard, 398 votes, Boston, 17 votes, and Nicholas, 28 votes. That's Roseau North so far, so that's not a final. But Miriam Blanchard is, the prospective candidate, is pretty far in front. So let's see how that goes. And the question I was going to ask is that, and that was really both for Dominica and for the region, is that the theme spoken to by the Prime Minister and the party in general was that a reset was needed for the Labour Party post-COVID. And in fact, it appears the representatives are getting younger, as you said, and with more women representing than ever before, I believe 10 women. Does this create any trends for elections in the future in Dominica and beyond in the region? So are we going to look at candidates? And bear in mind, when this Prime Minister became the Prime Minister, he was the youngest in the world. He was 31 years old. But if you look at the overall age, the age is dropping and the representation is getting more female. Are we trending towards
the Labour Party actually resetting towards the demographic quicker than the actual opposition does, which usually is not the case. Usually the opposition is the hungrier one, more willing to change.
Yeah, I think what Labour has done in 2014 thereabout, but 2019, sorry, what the leader has done, I thought was very strategic. So I'm not too sure whether it is a trend, but I know it appears to me, from a Labour point of view, that it appears that it was a short strategy to begin to bring in new blood, because essentially, if an organization doesn't renew its energy, it's going to fail. And Labour has been in power for some years. The people are getting tired of the same tone, the same voice, maybe different message, but the same faces, etc., the same dancing style, etc. So you bring in a fresh new team. It was strategically very important. Labour saw that. They started it in 2019. I thought when it started it was a little risky. They have continued it now. Workers ought to have done that. They did not do that. But that's another story.
Well, I think you have two things. One is, not too long ago, being elected to parliament didn't automatically make you a minister.
Yeah.
And I think now we have some younger people, maybe without that much experience, and it would be interesting to see what the prime minister does in terms of the naming of the cabinet. Because maybe there are some, right now, it's a time of an ambitious program, and maybe the prime minister may look outside. He's got some good representatives that won their seats and that can do work in the constituencies, but like his wife Melissa did, she didn't hold a portfolio as a minister. There may be a few others that don't, and there may be some persons outside that are appointed senators and they're given some portfolios. So it'll be an interesting thing. It's a time for reset. You know, it's an interesting, it'll be an interesting thing.
I believe we've been updated that Alex Bruno has joined us from Team Unity. Alex, can you hear us? Please unmute, Alex.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you.
Great. Welcome to this panel discussion on elections in Dominica, live. Are you hearing us clearly?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for joining us. What's your observation so far, Alex? I assume you're getting updates of the results so far. How based on what you felt Team Unity would do by stepping into the breach, how do you feel about the election so far, both for Team Unity and in general from a participation point of view?
Well, very satisfied that we were actually part of the conversation. We are now part of the discussion. And we're looking forward to building from there. As we said, as a team going into the election, that we believe there needs to be a new entry sport in terms of the conversation, political conversation on the island, that the usual rhetoric had gone stale on both sides to an extent, especially on the opposition side, and that there had to have been an injection of a new idea. So as a team, we think we would have accomplished that. I didn't think that we were going to win in any of the areas, but we gave it a good shot, and there were votes casted for our team. And now, as I said before, we are part of this new conversation, which should have started in Dominica's politics, especially in the opposition fraternity for at least the past decade. So that's what we represent, this new idea coming out of this election cycle.
So Alex, just to follow on from this, I mean, you spoke about the opposition almost as one organic group, but you and your party have been targeted for criticism by the opposition on the basis that you participated as an opposition in what they considered a breakaway from the stated aim of boycotting. Do you feel vindicated now that your decision to take part has been vindicated by the numbers of participation in the election? Or do you feel that you are going to have to continue defending yourself as something of a quisling or a turncoat to the opposition cause?
Oh, no, not at all. We feel vindicated because, as I said on regional media earlier today, that there were calls for boycott, but it seems as if those calls fell on their ears because this year we had a record number of candidates contesting. I think there were 45 altogether.
45.
45, which includes our 5 and I guess many other independent candidates. So it appears to me that either the call for boycott was not heeded or it was not sold properly to us. I certainly did not feel the need to boycott because the reasons given for the boycott did not measure up to that. So I think, based on what we saw, the participation, that the calls for boycott did not quite work. And I certainly feel vindicated as one of the administrative head of a team that we were in the right direction. And I'm looking forward to, Kenny, for ongoing conversation. We want to speak to all sides, all parties involved in the political process of Dominica, everybody with interest. Let's talk, because we cannot continue elections and politics the way it has been in Dominica for the past too long. And the incumbent has won again. I want to commend the incumbent for maintaining a presence in the Parliament of Dominica, the majority presence. I mean, this is unprecedented in regional and global history, I think, because we are still a democracy and this is a democratic election. So barring the situations where we have autocratic leaders, this is a democratic country. We had a democratic election. Some may argue it was not as fair as it should have been. I may even be one of those to say so. But the fact is we had elections, and this is unprecedented for a team to win so many times. So I commend the team wholeheartedly, and I'm looking forward to working with members of the team that has won, members of the former parliamentary opposition, the independents who would have won their seats in this one, and others, because we really have to find a formula to come together to change gears in terms of Dominica's politics.
So Alex, following again from this, and I anticipate that the independents in both Marigot and Salisbury, their phones must be burning up right now. Will you be one of those people reaching out to the independents in those constituencies to see if you can somehow get them to embrace team unity?
Well, it would be nice if we could get a seat in Parliament through one of those people who have been elected. It would be really good. I do not know whether that's going to happen, because based on the preliminary conversations I've been hearing, those seats are not quite independent. They are independently elected on behalf of the I mean, you know the story in terms of Dominica's politics and the party with the stronghold in those particular areas. So it appears that those independent people were elected, but they were elected at the behest of the main opposition, because I mean, I saw posts on their platform which asked the voters to vote in those two areas and support those candidates. And I can even foresee whoever emerges as the leader of the opposition, somebody is going to be, that this person may very well appoint senators who are favorable to the former incumbent opposition party in the Parliament of Dominica.
Okay,
that's what I think is going to happen.
So sorry to cut in, and I'm going to come to you shortly, Peter. In Roseau South, we have a final. Shakira Lockhart has 1,744 votes. And Wayne Norde has put up an impressive showing. He has 330 votes. And Julian got 91 votes. So if we look at the last election for Roseau South, 2,194 votes versus today's 1,744 votes. So it's not far off at all. Now, Peter, you were not here a while ago. I asked a question, and I want to just revisit it with you. You know, the question was that the Prime Minister's theme was this was a reset for the Labour Party post-COVID, and in fact, that he wanted to closer represent the voter base. And it appears, and it is, that the Labour Party representatives are getting younger and with more female representation. Do you see that as a trend for future elections in Dominica, and in particular for the region, that the demographic is going to be reflected more and more by a younger and more female representation?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. And that is one of the things that you can do when you have the flexibility of knowing that you're going to win. One could say on a counter, you can take chances in terms of inserting younger people and female candidates. I am a person that believes in female candidates, but the statistics show, however, that female candidates, generally speaking, do less well in Caribbean politics. The reality is that they're needed, notwithstanding. And what happened in the case of Grenada, for example, where you had a situation where the party was winning and winning comfortably, was that Dr. Mitchell increased the number of female candidates to the point where Grenada became the envy of the Caribbean because they had so many female candidates. Clearly, Prime Minister Skerrit is doing that too, and I think that's good on him that he can take those kinds of opportunities to increase the lower the demographic in terms of age, and increase the number of women. And in the case of Barbados, it's the same thing. We have a female prime minister, but we also have the largest number of women in parliament. And again, because the prime minister knew that she had the flexibility to not only make women senators and ministers, but give them seats that were winnable and overall increase the representation and the gender balance in our parliament. So I think it's brilliant, and I think it is easily reflective of what a lot of people in the region would like to be able to do. The reality, however, if you look at competitive races like St. Kitts and Nevis, they're doing less well in terms of females. And I think the challenge is really that they've had some close calls in which the female candidates and the history of female candidacy in the Caribbean, it would have been risky to put women in too large numbers because you only have 8 seats. And the fact is, if you're going to be scrambling and fighting to win them, you want people that are likely to win. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting I have a problem with female candidates. I'm saying that the data and the statistics have shown that women tend to do less well than men. So until we can change that conversation and get to a point where they're competing favorably, you have to give women a leg up in terms of essentially balancing and leveling the playing field. And I think that Prime Minister Skerrit was able to do that. And it will take the luxury of knowing that you're going to win to say, let's see if we can balance the playing field, and let's see if we can bring women in those kinds of instances.
Okay, I have
but
another-
yes, there definitely is a trend.
Thank you, Peter. We will be joining the electoral office in a while, and as well, the Prime Minister will be joining us on this panel in a few minutes. So that should be interesting.
I just wanted to say very quickly, though, and Alex, it's good to have you on the program and to hear your voice in relation to these matters. The question of opposition leadership, that's now going to be a fascinating theme. And I was anxious to hear from Alex in terms of, I mean, does this change the conversation now in terms of who is the legitimate opposition in Dominica? Does this give the alternative parties an opportunity to present that? Who do you think the opposition leader will be in this conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's going to be a very, very good question. Kiwana and Hassan, can you hear us at the electoral office? Please, can you give us an update on results?
Yes, nous savons que nous avons des résultats qui est officiel pour constituency Guatas, Portsmouth. Fenella Wenham gagne à constituency Guatas et puis 916 votes. Avec Magdalene Vidal indépendant, 114 votes. Encore, Fenella Wenham gagne à constituency Guatas et puis 916 votes. Avec Magdalene Vidal indépendant, 114 votes.
Yes, as indicated, Portsmouth, Fenella Williams, 916 for the Dominica Labour Party, and Magdalene H. Vidal, 147 as an independent. Again, those numbers are Fenella Williams, 916 for the DLP, and Magdalene H. Vidal, 114 as an independent.
Okay, thank you. So to give context, in 2019, Ian Douglas, the former representative for Portsmouth, got 1,253 votes. So again, Fenella Wenham has gotten pretty much around 80% of the votes of the Labour Party. And interestingly, the United Workers' Party in that election tallied 369 votes, and the representative running as independent it got 147 votes. So it seems to me that either there was a underlying strategy to say one thing on one hand and do another, or they were disregarded by people who are now going to become, at least in Salisbury and Marigot, going to become hot items. By the way, one other thing, I'm hearing that, and Kiwana and Hassan, I don't know if you can update, but I'm hearing that Roseau North has been called, for Miriam Blanchard. I'm also hearing, I have an update from Maho, Kasani Laville, 2016 votes. Dunstan Peters, Maggie Dunstan Peters, 82 votes, rejected 83, and spoiled 6. So in context, in 2019, in Maho, we had the former MP Rayburn Blackmore had 2,191 votes.
And how many did Kasani get?
2016 votes.
Wow.
So this is very, very close.
Again, Kenny, here is a candidate that's immensely popular. Huh?
Yes, he is.
Kasani he's telegenic. He's seen as very bright and a candidate of the future.
Charismatic.
So you're not surprised that he got almost the same as his predecessor, whereas in some of the other constituencies, the Labour Party candidates prevailed, but maybe they weren't as popular as someone with the caliber
I
of
must say,
Kasani.
I thought there would have been more voter apathy, but it seems that the polling in terms of the amount of Labourites who went out to vote has been extremely strong, given the kind of rope-a-dope that there's no one competing against them, though there is. So Peter, Alex, a question to both of you, which is in terms of the future of politics, in terms of political parties envisaging either civil unrest or boycott as an ongoing strategy. It seems to me that this does not work. We've got a small sample from the boycott, but it seems to me that this has not taken away people's appetite to go out and vote. Is this something you see that is going to be put aside and people are going to try more and more to engage the voters directly rather than trying to get them angry?
Well, I think, and all trends and all indications in terms of the polling that I've done, and I'm sure Peter would have done, suggest a sort of general fatigue on the part of Dominicans when it comes to the rhetoric mainly employed by the main opposition party. I hate to say it that way, but that is how it is. And generally, too, Dominicans would or are inclined to go a different route from the incumbent, but without a ready or suitable alternative, the people have not really switched or moved en masse. Although there are great numbers of people who declare independence or some sort of misgivings as far as the elections are concerned. I did a poll in Dominica in February, and I am not surprised with the results that we are seeing here. The results were as we are seeing. And I'm not too sure whether the major call for reform would have actually made a major difference in Dominica, because when we polled Dominica in February, it was just Dominicans living on the island, and the suggestions were what we're actually seeing in the polls. So I'm not surprised with what is happening. And to answer your question directly, I think there will be a switch. A switch has already taken place. The incumbent people, well, the independents who have run have shown that at least different people can step up and win. And the conversation will be that moving forward, that a new set of people, a new idea, more engaging approach. The confrontation is not going to work. Dominicans don't like confrontation as such. In fact, regional people are not confrontation in nature. We are not violent. We like to run our mouth. But when it comes to certain matters, we don't like the raga. So I think, Kenny, that's what's going to have to happen with people who are interested in taking on the incumbent. You really must get to the people, talk to the people, instead of shaming the people. Engage them, embrace them, and see what it is that you can do for them. Promise them the things that you can work with them with, and try to change the narrative. Until and unless the people in the opposition fraternity do that in Dominica, I think the incumbent machinery is going to continue to enjoy political prowess in Dominica.
Another question I have is also, I don't know if you see that a lot or you've seen that trend in other jurisdictions, both Callista and Peter.
but are we paying too much attention to the noise that's often made in social media? Are we putting too much weight on it? Because, often people believe or there are trends based around social media analysis and the noise being made on there. Whereas, I know Alex spoke to polling, but the real views of voters in Dominica is usually not known until they come to the polls. So is this something, it must be very difficult to poll long before elections, because you can never tell with Caribbean people. But is this something as a trend? Because this idea that the government is unpopular and that they can only win by bringing in overseas voters is well, that's been smashed again, as we've said. We're getting results from Wesley. So far, Fidel Grant, the incumbent, 717 votes, and Roll, who is the independent, has 316 votes. So an impressive showing by the independent so far.
Kenny, the Marigot winner, the feedback on the ground recently suggests maybe he is a little more independent and is not necessarily so tied in lockstep with the traditional UWP. And I say traditional UWP, I think there may be a change after tonight. People may be looking at this situation a little differently. And so he tended, based on the vibe and the conversation that I'd been getting out of Marigot, the basic people were saying, let's forget about this UWP thing now, let's get our representative, this is a new Marigot. And it would be interesting to see if that really continues, around in other constituencies as we go forward.
I'll tell you something. I hope this is the case. I heard there's a little clip I heard of him, and he said one or two lines which resonated with me. He was all keen on giving the people a voice, representation for the people. They need a voice. And he repeated a voice, about 3 times within a few seconds. I'm like, wow, that sounds different. So let us, if this is the case and he's the confirmed winner, then let's see what this brings to Parliament. Democracy.
Which brings another question to mind, guys. And again, Peter and Alex, I want you to weigh in on it. Alex, it might not be your favorite question right now, but does this indicate that there may be a tendency for political parties who are not performing to be put aside for independent candidates who are going to run and represent the voice of people much better than traditional political parties? Is this something that could impact other Caribbean islands, Peter, in order to replace traditional parties who are not performing but just for habit are simply there filling the breach?
Yeah, I'm expecting that this is a conversation that's going to come up, because we had some interesting developments with independent candidates in St. Lucia. 2 independent candidates won, but they won on the basis of accommodations. I'm inclined to think that the independent candidates that won this time also won on the basis of an accommodation, an unspoken accommodation with the UWP. My general theory in relation to independence is that they will not work in the context of a Dominican electorate or anywhere else in the Caribbean, outside of places like Cayman Islands and the BVI and those places where the electorates are really tiny, or probably in Barbuda. But it's not going to work in Dominica, and this doesn't persuade me that there is any different in terms of a qualification for that general analysis. And the qualification will be that there was an unspoken accommodation because of the fact that there was a boycott that allowed voters to feel comfortable shifting their allegiance somewhere. So that's the only independent qualification, but I don't see it as a trend. If the UWP was competing, they would have benefited from those votes. And clearly there is not an independent capacity on the part of an independent candidate to be able to compete effectively. So that, I think that would put that to rest. But to respond to some of the questions you were asking just now, whether boycotts work or not, I think that in this instance, it adds fuel to the 2 other examples that we had. the 1971 boycott in Trinidad and Tobago did not work. Art Williams took government and stayed for 5 years. The 1983 boycott in Jamaica didn't work because Edward Seaga won and he remained for 5 years. Clearly, this one has not worked because it was intended to stop the election from going forward. We've had an election, we have a government, we have an opposition, and they will continue presumably for the better part of 5 years, if not a full 5 years. So that didn't achieve anything. The violence on the last election, quite frankly, I think that the violence election day and the day before and so on helped to put the Labour Party back in office and to demonstrate to people that the UWP was not a serious organization that could be trusted to keep Dominica on a level playing field in terms of development. And I think, if anything, the Dominica Labour Party did better in the last election because of the foolishness that was done on the ground in some of the constituencies in relation to violence. So clearly that didn't work.
So,
the question is what
Peter,
works? What worked
Peter,
was
one second.
demonstrated recently in Grenada. You want me to stop?
No, I just want to add in something. You can continue. Okay. I'm going to add in something quickly. Statistically, right now, I'm just looking at some data. Labour is getting 75% so far of its 2019 vote, and with 2 constituencies to go. So it looks like turnout for Labour will be around 80%. And that's within the context of a lot of migration following Maria and the COVID pandemic. So those numbers may be even better than we think in context. Please continue.
Yeah, no, that was actually a point that I was going to make, because I had done 3 tiers in terms of the level of support that the Dominica Labour Party could expect. And to just comment on what you said, I was looking at 60%, 70% and 80%, 80% being what I thought was the best possible turnout based on the 2019 support. And guess what? They are at 73 based on my analysis here. There's only at 73%. No, they're at 78%, which means that they're almost at the 80% marker, suggesting that they would have been able to get 80% of the votes from the last election, which to me is the best possible outcome the Dominica Labour Party could want. That even in a situation with all of those factors and the boycott and whatnot, that your support was only dented by 20%. So getting back to the point I was making, though, about what I felt could work, I think that the Grenada example demonstrated what could work, which is that you take a political organization, and the NDC had so much in common with the UWP. It has a poor record of success, and essentially their narrative was framed around attacking Keith Mitchell for several years and suggesting that he was corrupt, et cetera, et cetera. Guess what? The narrative for the UWP in relation to Dominica is pretty much the same thing. And the outcomes have been the same. What I think the NDC did is to demonstrate that the model of saying, let's take a new person, let's take someone that is relatively exposed to that level of politics. Let's run a campaign where we talk about development issues, where we say to people, look, you have an opportunity for real change because I'm giving you something different, almost like a Donald Trump scenario. And you present that person, and the person has a better chance. Mike, I am confident that in the case of Dominica, this result is telling me that that's what Dominica clearly wanted. And I'm quite surprised to hear Alex revealing the fact that our polling results were somewhat similar, because the polls that we did in Dominica, which we reported on, it didn't make much of a splash in the press, suggested that this outcome would have been likely even if there wasn't a boycott, in terms of where people's minds are at, because ultimately people were comfortable with the Dominica Labour Party. They had reservations and concerns, as would be the case with any other government, but they were a lot more comfortable with Dominicans. And I can tell you, one of the other things that were interesting in my polls is that we polled leadership. And Dr. Fontaine was not the person that was preferred to lead. And I'm fascinated now seeing this outcome, wondering how, this is an individual who is going to have to lead an organization for the next how many ever years, as long as he can hold on, in a situation where the majority of Dominicans don't particularly want him. He is not the preferred option. And no, he is not going to be the opposition leader, and he's not going to have the benefit of that role either. It's not going to be a particularly good time for him and for the Dominica Labour Party going forward. But I agree entirely. There clearly was a desire for something different. UWP hasn't been offering it. And I think that they have an opportunity now to reflect long or hard on the kind of options that they need to offer the people of Dominica if they want to get back in the political game again.
So, Peter, I'd like to announce to you and to the viewers and to Alex that we've been joined by the representative for VCAS, the Honorable Roosevelt Skerritt. He's looking relatively happy. And so, Prime Minister, would you like to talk about your mood and the current state of play given?
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for having me. And I first want to extend congratulations to the two candidates who won in Salisbury and Marigot. I think it clearly shows that the elections were credible and they were free and fair, and that the voters of Dominica exercised the right to vote, and they voted for candidates of their choosing. And I also want to congratulate all of the candidates of the Dominica Labour Party. 19 out of the 21 who contested, and of course the two who unfortunately did not get the majority vote in these two constituencies. I want to also congratulate the other independent candidates, and of course Team Unity Dominica that has demonstrated a high level of maturity and commitment to the cause. I will say to the people of Dominica that I intend to meet with, first of all, the two elected members so that we can chart a new course for the country. I could hear from them their vision for their constituencies and what we can do as a government to support them and to support those constituencies. I also intend to meet with all of the candidates who contested so that I can see how they can participate in the national reset that I have spoken about. And of course, I will meet with the leader of the United Workers' Party to discuss with him some of his views where the country is concerned. I am hoping and praying that these elections afforded us an opportunity to also have a national reset in respect to our political discourse and engagement. We have to go back to the days when we fought hard with politics, we campaigned hard, we would bruise each other, but at the end of the day, maybe 2 months later, we're back as neighbors and brothers and sisters. I have no political access to grind. Certainly, somebody who's won 5 straight terms cannot have any political access to grind. So I'm really hoping that we can change the atmosphere in the country where the political discussion is concerned. And so I want to commend all of the independents who contested and those of them who won. And I must say that I followed very keenly the independent candidates and of course Team Unity Dominica's candidates. And by and large, they were very constructive in the engagement. Guys like Buju and the gentleman who contested in Maho, the Maggie, very constructive. Clearly it's almost a 360-degree turn to their previous engagements. And the Team Unity candidates in Marigot and elsewhere demonstrated that level of maturity as well. I have copies of their manifesto, for want of a better term, and we'll be looking at those as well. I also want to thank Peter. Peter has been our pollster for the last, certainly the 6 straight elections, and he has been our advisor on polling, and I can tell people that I believe in science, and I do not only utilize Peter for election projections, but also what's on the people's minds in Dominica, the policy focus of the government. So we conduct polls throughout the 5 years, not just during an election. And Peter has been engaged by the Labour Party over the last 6 elections. I also want publicly to thank Hartley Henry, who has been our strategist way back in the days of Rosie Douglas. Since 1992, he has been an advisor to Rosie Douglas, then Pierre Charles, and myself for the last 5 straight elections. He had gone into retirement, but he came back for a final one, But certainly there's no one in the Western Hemisphere who has a better understanding of politics and political strategy than Hartley Henry. I think he is an extraordinary regional resource, and I'm hoping that University of West Indies and other universities within the region can tap into his intellect and his political thoughts, so that we can build a new cadre of political strategists and political scientists in the region, because you need that. You need people who can understand human behavior, who can understand political behavior, who can advise on policies and various interventions where the economy and the social development of the country is concerned. And of course, we also want to commend and to thank my friend Charlie Jong, who has worked with us for the last several elections, and people like of course Charlie Jong, and we have others who have worked with us, and so we're very grateful for that. And of course, we have our local team of people who I rely on. The difference between myself and other political leaders is that I engage a wide cross-section of the society, including those who do not support me, so I can pick their brain, and see how they're thinking, and so forth. But I'm hoping that this is a new page in our country's history. I know the issue that people have raised is the issue of electoral reform. I rather say it's the modernization of the electoral process, and which essentially are two fundamental issues. One, national ID cards, and two, the verification process to address issues of the large voters list, list of electors.
So Prime Minister, I want to just cut you for a second here. I want to ask you this because it fits in what you just said. The lack of bipartisanship has affected the political climate in Dominica, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, despite the ongoing disagreements on electoral reform, and Dr. Jajak brought it up earlier, not many people, certainly regionally, would remember that the government here brought electoral reform to Parliament and backed down when civil unrest from the opposition appeared to signal discontent.
Yeah,
but this was despite you having enough of a majority to force it through, and you didn't.
Yeah.
The question is, how can we ensure that electoral reform isn't used as a football going forward? Because the past tends to suggest that it is being used as such.
Well, with the executive, because one has to appreciate that there are different branches of government. Insofar as the responsibility of the cabinet is concerned, the executive, we had taken all actions to advance electoral reform. All that was missing was the approval of the parliament, the legislation, to give the legal authority to the Electoral Commission to advance those changes in the electoral process. And just to underscore my commitment to electoral reform, we were impacted in August of 2015 by Tropical Storm Erica. 90% of the GDP was affected. Hotels were washed away. All the bridges on the West Coast were washed away. 2 communities were washed away, had to deal with relocation, resettlement of all those communities. Our revenues dropped because tourism was affected, agriculture was affected. In early 2016, I provided the Electoral Commission with all of the resources they requested of me as Minister of Finance to advance the electoral reform process. And that may have been in excess of $7 million. I do not think anybody would have faulted me if I had said to the Electoral Commission, electoral reform is not a priority. I have to feed the people of Petite Savan and others, and people who lost their jobs in Daly, and now playing with Jungle Bay, who have been washed away and so on. So this was a demonstration of extraordinary commitment. And also, I brought in the Commonwealth to review the legislation. They gave us a stamp of approval that it will meet the recommendations that they have made and others have made, and so forth. And I want to say, going forward, that I intend to have, and before this, people would have said, well, Skerrit, you had the majority in 2015. You had, 2017, you had 15 seats out of the 21. But I felt that electoral reform and voting was too much of a fundamental issue for the government alone to be advancing it. That we need to have broad-based consensus on this issue. Because so many people fought and died for the right to vote. And we wanted to ensure that nobody was disenfranchised in the process. I will say this time around that nobody's going to accuse me of not advancing the process. By Easter of next year, we will go to Parliament and pass the legislation. We will pass the legislation, and we will have consultations come January. I'm hoping to use the month of January to have consultations with all stakeholders, and let us come to a consensus. There cannot be unanimity on this point. Let's come to a consensus, and I can say to the Dominican public, I've already written to the Commonwealth, the OAS, and CARICOM, asking for technical support to review the report of Sir Dennis Byron to ensure that it captures what they would recommend, they have recommended to us that would meet international best practices. Once they give me the stamp of approval, from their point of view, and I've asked them to do so very quickly, when we engage in the various publics on this, come Easter, we will certainly pass legislation and start the process of the issuance of national ID cards, the verification process. What I would say to the people of Dominica, that we have, what the only caution I will put is this, that I do not believe that we should be disenfranchising the diaspora, Dominicans living overseas, from voting. And I'm not suggesting that those who are not on the list should get registered, but those who are currently on the list should be given an opportunity to get registered. The leader of the United Workers' Party lived in the diaspora. He just came back a few weeks ago, and he's the leader of the party. And so here it is. We have to maintain a level of seriousness in the discussion and not kick the can down the road. The reality is, and the sincerity of my heart and so on, I would have loved for this thing to be set aside. Because the United Workers' Party used two things against me and the Labour Party. One, corruption, and two, electoral reform. They have stopped in large measure on the point of corruption, and they have stuck only to electoral reform. And it is in the Labour Party's interest to get this electoral reform set aside. Because once you get the electoral reform set aside, then there's nothing else to talk about. Nothing else to talk about. So I would like for us to sign off on this, and so to that by Easter of next year, we would have concluded all aspects of it. And I made that commitment in my address at the St. Joseph rally last night, I believe. And so I will be engaging all stakeholders. So Alex Bruno, I will certainly reach out to you as the leader advisor to Team Unity Dominica. And I really want to commend you publicly for the approach that you're taking. And this is the approach you should take, of constructive engagement, constructive dialogue. Well, we cannot disagree on everything. If the government is building a hotel that's going to create jobs, why should we try to destroy the hotel? If the government is supporting farmers to grow more food, why should we condemn this? If I'm building a bridge and you say, well, the bridge should be 3 lanes and rather than 2, I can understand that. But to say that the bridge is not important, when we can't get across the river, it doesn't help for constructive engagement. So I'm saying to the Jamaican people, from me, you will see increasingly more broad-based engagement. But at the end of the day, people must come with clean hands, and they must not come with ulterior motives. They must come to the table with a genuine desire to advance in the national efforts towards our prosperity, our peace, and our progress. And we look forward to engaging all stakeholders. I accept this victory from the people of Dominica with the greatest sense of humility. This is an extraordinary confidence that the people have shown in us. The voter turnout, I believe, in all circumstances, was exceptional. And I want to say to people that the Labour Party did not facilitate anybody coming to Dominica to vote from overseas. Not one. We did not pay the ticket for one person to come to Dominica in these elections. And when you look at the numbers in Castle Bruce increased the voter count from last election. And so forth. So because my responsibility as the leader of the Labour Party is to bring out the Labour Party votes. And I think people have to judge us on how well we have been able to do so. And when you look at the numbers, I mean, 80%, 90%, and even in some cases, even more than 100% turnout, as in the case in Castle Bruce, I don't think anybody in this country can question the legitimacy of these results at all. No one can question the legitimacy of the results, and I think we have to enjoy our Christmas and get ready for hard work in January.
Yeah, yes, PM, if I may, congratulations on a resounding victory. As leader of the Labour Party, your job is to secure all the seats. You fought to secure all the seats. You prevailed in 19, but other independents or the opposition won in 2. But long term, do you think that this may be a good thing, that we do have some balance in terms of the Parliament of Dominica?
Well, the Constitution provides for a party to win all seats, and we're looking forward to win all seats. I would welcome all seats in Parliament, and let it be the first political party and leader of a political party to have won all 21 seats. But we concede defeat in Marigot, and we concede defeat in Salisbury. The 2 independent candidates won. And we accept the results on the preliminary results. Tomorrow there'll be a final count. But from looking at the numbers, we lost in Marigot by 109 votes. We lost in Salisbury by over 100 votes. I mean, that's a decent margin. And both of our candidates made a valiant fight, and they fell short because the people exercised their franchise and decided they wanted the 2 independent candidates. And I think, objectively speaking and serious speaking, it is not bad for Dominica. I think it's a good thing that we can have opposition people in the parliament, and to be able to bring a different side and to question and and provide oversight to the government. So I welcome them, and whatever guidance, whatever support that they will need, and this is what I'll offer to them, because it doesn't have to be contentious, because they're gonna need me to help in advancing some of the projects and programs in the constituency, which we will engage them on. But if we do not allow ourselves to enjoy some level of congeniality, to be able to speak to each other and so forth, then it's not going to help them or help their constituents. So it's important for them to not carry through what we've been subjected to for the last 13 years. And let us be a new chapter in Dominican politics, and a new chapter in engagement and camaraderie. I would like to be able to bring these opposition members to CARICOM meeting with me as part of our delegation, and to OECS meeting, part of our delegation, so that they can have an appreciation for the regional issues. We're going to the United Nations, the General Assembly, they could form part of our delegation. So this is the kind of engagement I would like to have, but not the one where, while I am inside negotiating for millions for Dominica, then the opposition is outside telling the world, do not give Dominica money. That's not what we want for Dominica. And I think, and so we look forward to engaging them. I do not know the lady in Salisbury at all, but I know the gentleman in Marigot very well. I know his parents and his family, very good friends of mine. And I look forward to helping the young man build his political career, whether as an independent or he wants to form his party, or maybe Alex might be speaking to him tonight, I don't know. So there may be people. Well, by the smile of Alex, I suspect Alex
I think
he's already having WhatsApp conversations.
I think he's texting under the table, I could see that. But PM, you suggested a word that was used on the campaign was reset.
Yeah.
And you've indicated, but I want to get it from you directly, that are you extending that reset, even though the UWP as an opposition has been harmed in our opinions? All of us prior to you coming here have indicated that they've been harmed deeply by their unwillingness to participate. Are you willing to meet with the new
leader
yes. I mean,
Thompson Fontaine, and to try and tone down the climate, and also the responsibility to, the greater the power, the more the responsibility. The power of incumbency, has to be obviously used wisely again, because you are in a position with a reset to be able to get and include more people from the opposition at all levels in the Dominica story, so to speak. So do you see that?
Yeah, of course, I will meet with Dr. Thompson Fontaine at some point. Obviously, in the order of meeting, I have to meet the elected people first, and then come to those who contested, and then come to those who are not in the parliament. So there's a new pecking order, and one has to appreciate that that there'll be a new leader of the opposition, and therefore I have to give reverence to his office or her office. I suspect they have to share because they both come from independent stuff, so there may be some power sharing. One may serve the first 2.5 years, or the other may serve 2.5 years, appoint 2 senators each. So I'm not sure what kind of arrangement they're going to be having. So we will certainly meet with Dr. Fontaine, myself personally, and I'll be leading the government on those engagements. And I have already started the process of national engagement. During the campaign, I met with unions. I met with representatives of professional bodies, the nurses, the police. I met with the private sector entities, and to share with them my perspectives on what I determined to be the national reset. So, for example, in education, while we've made a lot of progress in addressing issues of access and etc., we have to now redefine and look at the curriculum differently, and to determine whether it is responding to our national imperative. So there'll be some paradigm shifts in terms of our education system, ensuring that we divert more resources to early childhood education, to ensure that every child in Dominica, irrespective of your economic circumstance, your social circumstance, you must have access to an early childhood institution, paid for by the state. And also technical vocational education is going to be catapulted to the top of the list in terms of government funding, because we build international airports. We have 5-star and 4-star hotels. We need to have the skill sets to sustain those investments. That you have a hotel, Sam. If you have some electrical issues, who do you call? Plumbing issues, who do you call? We build an international airport. There's some skill sets that we have. We are advancing heavily the digital economy, and we're seeing so many opportunities there. Just in 2 years during COVID, we have employed 271 young Dominicans with online work, earning on average $800 per week. And so we're seeking to expand this program to create more employment, the issue of training in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, coding. So there are a number of things that we need to create jobs for young people, because the reality is, one of our challenges is that we have sent so many young people to study. And young people want to dress nice, they want to dress pretty, and they want to do work that resembles and can accommodate that type of dress and so forth. And so we need to create opportunities for better paying jobs, more attractive jobs for young people. Because I went on some construction site in Dominica and I met some young engineers, and they're properly attired. So people, even if you're an engineer, you're on the field, people want to be able to look decent in the dressing and so forth, and the modernization of agriculture, seeking to reduce our food import bill and the whole issue of civics in school and more community engagement. So there's going to be a number of things we're going to do, and what I'm already started doing is to, at the end of the discussions or the consultations, I would like for us as a country to have a 15-year strategic plan for Dominica that all of us sign on to, and we can have an oversight entity, the private sector, civil society, the unions, the professional bodies, forming that task force or that body that can oversee the implementation of the strategic plan for Dominica. And I already have a benefactor who has agreed to finance the drafting of that, using an international firm to assist us in drafting that strategic plan for Dominica. And so this is all part of the national reset. As you know, I have indicated my imminent departure from politics, and I have just about 2.5 years left, and there's some things. So there's some things that I have to do, and I don't have much time left, and I believe that I am, and I say so with the greatest sense of humility, that I think I'm in a better position to get them done than anybody else will have the opportunity to do that. And the other thing that will be put on the table is the issue of constitutional reform. We will be unearthing the report from Dr. Liverpool, which is the most recent document on electoral reform, constitutional reform, and to look at aspects of our constitution which needs modernizing. And so there'll be a white paper on this, and try to truncate this thing. Sometimes they take too long because everybody wants to be consulted, but fine. But when you're consulted, let the consultation be, let there be an end to it. And if you agree on something, do not change your mind tomorrow, as we've seen with electoral reform. Because if we had agreed on some of the elements in electoral reform, then we would not be here talking about electoral reform and so forth. But that's Dominican. We just have to try to work around those nuances and arrive at a position. But I believe it's in a sense it's a new dawn for Dominica, and we look forward to engagement. I would have loved to win 21 seats, but we have 119, and we accept this, and I think maybe for the first time since 2005, we may not have any court challenges, I hope, and we can go about our business and spend more time focusing on people's lives and livelihoods, and because there's still, while we have made a lot of progress in Dominica, there's still a lot of people who need to be taken care of, and that's going to be my preoccupation. I have paid Soufriette and half of Good Hope to relocate, to resettle. When I look at the damage in the east, I'm going to need to raise about $350 million in the east and southeast to address the issues. I have to build a new bridge in Rosalie, next to the hotel there, new infrastructure, housing. You know, it is going to be a huge project, almost similar to what we did in Bellevue-Chopin. So we're looking at an estimate of about $350 million to restore lives and livelihoods in the southeast of Dominica. And when you look at the results in the Castle Bruce, I believe people recognize that the only party and leader who could deliver to them those things, the Labour Party. This is why you saw an increase in the vote count in Castle Bruce. People recognizing that it is that Labour is still the best choice, and you can say what you want, but it's safer if Labour, especially if you're having difficulties. So we look forward to that, and tomorrow is going to be a brand new day for Dominica, and as early as Friday, I will meet with the two elected opposition people, independent people, so that we can share them certain perspectives and put the state resources at their disposal to assist them in finding their way through Parliament. So I'm hoping that they do not get influenced by other extraneous considerations and coming from a new perspective, you know. So we'll have to wait and see. But I only have control over my actions and my words, and I will do everything possible to facilitate them and to ensure that we can have a constructive dialogue and turn the page of our history in our country. And people, it is not fair to give the world the impression that whenever there is election in Dominica, we expect violence. You know, and I think we have to move away from this. Dominica is a peaceful place. I drive and I walk the streets with no security. Nobody bothers me, you know, and that's Dominica. But we've had instances where it has actions have been taken that give people the impression that Dominica is not a safe place. So everybody in the Caribbean and the world were holding on to their seats waiting to see what's going to happen in election day in Dominica, that there's going to be violence. And I assured the observers, for example, one of the observer teams told me that whether it's safe for them to go out on election day, whether they will need extra police security. I said, no. I said, you can walk the streets anywhere in Dominican election. It will be very peaceful. I give you the assurance that you'll be able to hear a pin drop on election day. And thank God this is what happened. And we look forward to tomorrow. But, yeah, sorry.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, go ahead, Callista.
Congratulations, Prime Minister, on yes, another victory. Callista Faria, the narrative. Still holding out for that interview, sir, that one-on-one interview, sir.
Let me meet you on today's Tuesday. Thursday, I'll meet you on Thursday. I'll come up on Thursday. So clear the schedule for me on Thursday. That's fine?
I will do that, and
Okay.
I will give a heads up to our connection
Sure.
in Dominica to make sure it happens. But you said a couple of times that you would have liked to win all 21 seats. You hear people say a clean sweep is never really good for the democratic process. You've said it twice. Why would you want to win 21 seats? Why would you prefer not to have an opposition?
But that's why I contested 21 seats. I mean, you don't contest to lose. I mean, you contest to win.
Why would you prefer the Dominica to not have an opposition then?
I'm not saying I prefer. I'm not saying I prefer. I mean, we have to respect the will of the people. With the will of the people. In your country, 3 times, 15-0. In Barbados twice, 30-0. So it is not unusual, and the Constitution anticipated that as well, the possibility that you will have those circumstances. So you contest to win. I don't go fighting the candidate and not support the candidate to the fullest extent I can as the leader of the party to win. At the end of the day, I keep telling my candidates, you only have one vote. That is yours. You understand? And it is the will of the people. People are free to vote whoever they want. And so we would have loved to win 21 because I feel the 21 candidates, but we fell short by 2, and I respect that, and I acknowledge that we have lost these 2 seats, and I recognize the 2 independent candidates as the parliamentary representative-elect of those constituencies. But if I had gotten 21, I would have, the same way, I would have certainly have a drink on it, maybe some coconut water that I normally drink, but certainly 21. I mean, if when the West Indies goes to play, they go to win, and they don't say, well, we've won 5, you can take number 6. No, so it's a contest, and it's a contest that will have a winner and a loser. And so had the people of Dominica voted for us in all 21 constituencies, then we would have accepted it. They voted for us in 19 out of the 21, and we accepted likewise.
Okay, well, I don't know if you can compare a cricket game with the opposition in the democratic process, but there's nothing they can. You see, a lot of academics and people and journalists are talking about this and that, but the Constitution allows for it. There's nothing in the Constitution that constrains or sets a limit on how many seats you can win. Otherwise, the Constitution would have said no one party can contest all 21. But we are free to contest. I mean, like this election, you had 45 candidates contesting, more than we had in 2019 and more than we had in 2014. Even if the main opposition party said they were boycotting the elections. People who were qualified to contest as candidates availed themselves to the process, and they became candidates. Unfortunately, the Treasury has picked up a few $500 from them, and the reality is, I wish I could find out giving back to them because, but that's what it is. But no, if we won 21, we'd have accepted it. We won 19, great. We won 18 last time, we accepted it. We won 15 the time before that, we accepted it. We won 18 the time before that, we accepted it. So we accept the will of the people, and this is what it is.
PM, just from
No,
the,
no, Prime
sorry.
Minister, let me just two more questions. What would you say at this point, having won so many times, what would be your greatest achievement at this time? And if you did not accomplish anything else for the next 2.5 years, and I spoke to you 2.5 years from now, and I asked you, what is your greatest legacy? What would your response
The
be?
truth is, I don't preoccupy myself with legacy. I am at the service of the people of Dominica. And I try to do good to the country and to the citizens as best I can with the resources that I have. So I don't go watching myself in the mirror and saying, I have this legacy or that legacy. It is left for the people of Dominica to judge me, and I'm hoping that they judge me fairly in terms of my stewardship of the country. And one has to take that in the context of the fact that I have been exposed to so many exogenous shocks and natural disasters, the pandemic, and what we have done to overcome those and to surmount those challenges, and where we are as a country, and the respect which Dominica now has in the international community, which it did not possess prior to me becoming the Prime Minister of the country. Simply put, that's to say that I love this country, and that's my commitment. But in terms of legacy, and that's for the people to decide. Those who preoccupy themselves with legacy are not people who are preoccupied with working on behalf of the people. It's more self-aggrandizement rather than at the service of the people of Dominica. But people will decide what they believe would be my greatest contribution to Dominica.
Of all the things that you set out to do, what you must have set out to do some things when you got on the path of
Well, we said
becoming the Prime Minister.
we've achieved many things. When I came into government, only about 44% of primary school graduates had access to secondary school. It took us about 3 years to get this. So in 2005, universal access to secondary education. When I came to government, we only had 7 out of 100 students who studied CXC exams having access to a community college. Access to university for the ordinary working class Dominican was limited to Russia and to Cuba. We've extended that to all parts of the world, where we've trained thousands of young Dominicans. Our health system is on an extraordinarily high level now. Our infrastructure is certainly in top shape. The respectability which Dominica now has in the international community, where we have been able to have Baron Scotland elected to the Commonwealth Secretariat twice, and Dr. Carissa Aiton to Paho twice, and Irwin Larrock at CARICOM and so forth. These are positions which governments must vote on, and you have to be able to negotiate and to persuade governments to vote for your candidate, and so little Dominica was able to do this, not once but twice, and not in one institution but 3 institutions during my tenureship as Prime Minister. But also is the respect for the people of Dominica. And when you look at housing and access to housing that we have done, the facilitation of investments in our country, so there are a number of things that we have done as a government, and our response to the natural disasters. I mean, when you have 90% of our economy was affected in 2015. In 2017, 226%. So in a matter of 2 years, you're talking about over 310% of your GDP affected. And everybody felt that Dominica was destroyed beyond repair, beyond reconstruction, and that if at all we're able to reconstruct this country, it's going to take us no less than 20 years. And see where we are as a country. And then 2 years later, pandemic, and we're still standing as a small country with no resources, bauxite and oil and olive oil and gold, and so to export. The only thing we have is the indomitable spirit of our people, and that's what we use, to build our country and to get the vast majority of Dominicans to catch the vision that you have articulated for the country and to make a contribution towards the attainment of that vision. So we have done many things for country, and you see the results in election with 19 seats. which is unprecedented in a sense. No political party in our history has increased its seats in parliament prior to me becoming the leader of the Labour Party. And we've done so many times in the last 5 straight elections.
PM, now that you're getting to the point of you've basically stated that you're going to be departing from the political scene in what, 2.5 years? I know you said before you're not concerned about your legacy, but there are a number of things that have to be done. Does that mean that, given that you have a short time left, that more is going to be accomplished in those 2.5 years than in most small spreads of that same kind of timeline, because there's a lot to be done?
We one of the major projects we have is international airport. You will see us pushing heavily on this airport. We expect it to be completed at the end of 2026. It's an important project for us that will help in the continued transformation of Dominica. Dominica is becoming a destination that is sought after. We have the hotel rooms, we have the facilities, we have the attractions. Our challenge has always been air access. So we're pushing this heavily. So there are a number of areas that we have to deal with. Marina, Newport, Modern Port. So there are a number of things that we're going to push, and certainly we're going to be accelerating a number of them. And this is why I'm hoping, and a lot of our ability to achieve a lot of things will depend on the Dominican public. What is going to be our contribution? Are we just going to sit on the fence and criticize, or are we going to come and work and join forces with the government? Set aside our petty partisan differences. Religious leaders must preach the word and not preach politics. Unions must ensure that not only a better wage for your workers, but productivity is maintained. Teachers must teach our students and ensure that every child succeeds. If we have doctors on call and we pay you on call at the hospital, you have to come out and serve the public. So every one of us must be more diligent in the country. And it's going to require some level of introspection from each of us in the society, but also peer review. We have to call out people when they're not performing. We have to move away from this notion that we blame one person called a prime minister for everything that goes wrong in the country. It has become so absurd that people blame me for even the rain that falls. And we have to get people to account for this. If we're paying somebody to patch the roads, you can't blame me, the person did not do a good job. We need to tell it, and if children don't pass an exam, you can't hold me responsible. My function is to provide the resources, to provide the school, provide the teaching tools and teacher. It is up to the teachers and the parents to ensure that the children learn, the children do well. If we are paying doctors and they don't show up, we have to hold the doctor accountable. Unless we start holding people accountable in the various stations, we will not see the kind of progress and the changing of attitude that we want to see in our country. And so it's going to be we're going to need to have a lot of fireside conversations in the country.
So, PM, should we expect to see a more, so to say, robust administrative style on your part with respect to ministers and people in government offices and other people getting the job done now? As you've expressed, you can only do so much as the manager. Other people are you only have 2.5 years. Are you going to be tightening up the screws?
Oh, yes. It's ridiculous that people write to government and get no acknowledgement of the letter, far more a response. This has to stop. And so I'm going to put greater responsibility on the part of the permanent secretaries to ensure that if members of the public write to us as a government, we have a duty first to acknowledge it and a duty to explore the concern of the person. People can't write to us and years later there's no communication. And ministers are going to have to be more diligent and more engaged on the public. We can't have a minister in a cabinet who hasn't communicated to the public in a year or 6 months. You have to report to the public what are you doing in that ministry. And likewise, parliamentary representation. People vote for you if the expectation that you will make their lives better. And you may not be able to make everybody's life better at the same time, but we have to make time for the people. And there's absolutely no reason why ministers don't make time for the people and parliamentary reps, because I'm supposed to be the busiest person in the government, but I make time for people. I see 150 people, 200 people in one day, myself, one-on-one. I'm not telling the minister to see 200 people because everybody has a different personality, but make time for the people. And because we have to get people to be part of the process, be part of the process, engage people, be sincere with people, don't make promises you cannot keep, so that you can get rid of them. And I am going to be very clear with the ministers, that they have to be diligent. And none of them is indispensable.
Right.
None of them, they're all hearing me. I am not going to accept foolishness from anybody. This is a difficult time, and it requires diligence and discipline from every single person. The public servants and the cabinet, we have to display a greater level of professionalism and commitment to the job. This thing of coming to meetings late and so on, we have to stop those things. I mean, the section will come to a function late. The president is there and ministers walking, and we've as if it's a badge of honor to come to a function late. We have to step up the game in the country, and that is part of, and public servants and everybody have to be more diligent. That's part of my frustration in this country, that people don't seem to want to take their roles seriously, and with a certain level of dispatch, and we can't work 8 to 4. The Bible warns us about sleeping. It says, I believe, that he who is a lover of sleep, poverty shall visit you. So we can have a rest, but you can't be sleeping. We can't work 8 hours a day. What happens to the 16? What happens to the 16? 8 hours a day. What do you expect to earn 8 hours a day? So all of these things that we have to change our attitudes to, if we're to get, because they say time is money, and if we're to get to the level that we're going to get. So, yeah.
PM, I'd like to find out from Alex Bruno if he has any questions for you. Alex?
Yeah, well, not necessarily. I just wanted to commend him, as I did earlier, congratulate him and his team for an unprecedented 6th victory at the polls, and to tell him that I think he exemplifies what competitive politics is about. Some may choose to disagree with his antics, but as someone who understands politics from different perspectives, he certainly is a fantastic package to work with as a politician. And of course, he has his own ways and means and isms, and many people seem to dislike and many people seem to like. But from a factual point of view, he is a strategist dream in terms of what he brings to the table. So as I've done throughout my career, I want to commend him publicly and to wish him well and God's blessings upon him. And based on what he has said, it appears as if he's ready to take a break, which I think he needs. It might have been overdue by a term or two. He's the Prime Minister. So I look forward to probably you transitioning out and the continuity of our government, because the government is not the Prime Minister's government, it's Dominica's government. And he had his role to play, he played his role. And based on what he has said, I think he's ready to pass it on and to let other people continue the government of our country. I have interests, and other people also have interests. And I think, as he said, let's come around the table and let's chat. Why can't we have this kind of a flavor in our political conversations moving forward? I mean, Dominicans are tired of the fight and the rah-rah and the mépris and all of that. I mean, I am the subject of tremendous political mépris. And it has helped me to grow. And I'm looking forward to, again, engaging with the Prime Minister and the other candidates of who have won, especially Darren, Lloyd, St. Joseph, my son, and others. Why can't we just continue to speak with each other instead of speaking at each other? I think the future for our politics can be good. It depends on what we bring to the table.
And I agree with you. That's the approach, and then we look forward to engaging. And I said, I'm hoping that this is a new chapter in our political engagement. I am offering that opportunity for us to write a new chapter. Let the past be the past, and let's look forward to a more constructive engagement. Some people, I make statements on the political platform, that people may call maple. It's not really not maple. It's more political pecan. You can't always be tense and talking policy and so on. You have to keep the crowd active and so forth. So, but I can be a hard hitter. So somebody, but I can share with politicians what I believe they can do to be successful. And I keep warning my colleagues that we're not here to change politics. You cannot change politics. And there's a certain tendency by a lot of folks, especially folks who have gone to universities, and they want to change politics. It's not my response to change politics. I cannot change history. I can make history. I cannot change politics. You were elected to transform the lives of people from where they are to something better and transform the circumstance of your country. And this is the error a lot of politicians make. They want to come and change things, and they won't succeed. So they spend a lot of time with a whole sort of intellectualism and so on, rather than focusing on what really matters to people. And who really matter in all of this, merely people.
Because what the PM is saying is quite telling, Kenny, and Peter could bear me witness to that while the issue of reform is vexing and loud, that's not the major issue in Dominicans' minds. The major issue that Dominicans actually are concerned with right now is money, jobs, and the economy. The second major issue is housing, concerns in terms of taking care of the families, housing their family. And the third major issue, based on our findings, happens to do with education and reform, not just electoral reform, but general reform of our systems in society. So yes, we are aware that this electoral reform matter has been partisan, it has been brandished, and everyone in Dominica is aware of it by now. But in terms of the bread and butter, what Dominicans are concerned with when we travel the length and breadth of the island, are these three major objectives. And if we can satisfy the people's needs, if we can at least appease them and say, look, that's what we're planning to do, here's a program we have in place to actually meet and address your needs, I think that will work well. And the party that does it best is the party that will continue to do well in the present situations.
Alex, there appears to be some validity and reliability on your polls, eh?
There has always been, Mr. Prime Minister.
But you're right. You're right. I mean, people have made electoral reform appear to be the priority in the minds of the people of Dominica, but I mean, nobody comes to me and tell me, Scary, what you did about electoral reform. People, there are a lot of challenges confronting the average family in Dominica. So the electoral reform thing is really an academic exercise in a sense. It's important because we have to modernize everything, but it is not the main thing, I agree, if you confront in the minds of Dominicans. The people of the East, for example, you think electoral reform that's what's on their minds? I mean, people in Fablé and Petit Soufrière, where they're cut off and their investments have been lost. And the young person who just graduated from university waiting to get a job, and the number of apartment building owners waiting to see whether the university will in fact be open next year, so that their apartments can be reused and can be used, and they can start making money again after the departure of Ross. But there are some things that we have to do because it's all part of the construct, and we have to do it. And it appears to be something that is contentious, and so let us address it so that we remove whatever appearance of contention among ourselves and between ourselves.
PM, do you wish to commend, I bet you do, the Dominican people for the peacefulness? Because I can tell you as a hotelier, and You may be aware, National Geographic, their board of directors are here. We have 3 major groups of international celebrities on island. And I personally have been very nervous walking on eggshells, hoping that we didn't have a 2019 scenario, because my God, it would have been the worst thing in terms of publicity. But Dominicans basically, notwithstanding, there were people very upset, and you can't discount the reasons for their being upset. People did maintain order, even the candlelight vigil that the UWP had last night. So I think, if you want to speak to that.
So, I mean, we have the majority of Dominicans are mature people, and I think sometimes we allow a small faction to be highlighted rather than the larger part of Dominica that are really lovely people. Like, for example, Maricot. I tell people I've never been disrespected in Maricot, and I walk the streets of Maricot. I go to meetings there and so on. These are respectable people. But if you ask the average Dominican about Maricot, most Dominicans will not want to go to Maricot because of what some have defined it to be. Likewise, Salisbury. If Salisbury people do not stand up and change people's perception of Salisbury, it will be like Granby back in the 80s and the 90s. So they have to change this, because otherwise they're going to suffer economically and socially, because the average person won't want to go to Salisbury. So they have to, the leaders down there, the church leaders and the community leaders must recognize that this cannot be looked at purely from a partisan standpoint. What kind of community you want your children to grow up in? And when you grow older and you have your walking stick, and you live alone as a senior citizen, what kind of society you want to live in? Because the very same people who you're encouraging to throw stones and to burn tires, they will come and rob you. They will vandalize your homes, because that's what you taught them. And so I'm hoping that the new PAL rep will engage in community consultations, and because Salisbury has some bright people, some of the smartest people in Dominica come from Salisbury, but we allow the community, they allow the skirmishes to overshadow hardworking people who built huge homes for themselves and with a cutlass, send their children to school with a cutlass, we have to move away from this hate, otherwise they'll destroy themselves by their own actions. So it's an opportunity. I hope that there could be a paradigm shift in how they view themselves and how they view the communities, because no man is an island, and no country is an island unto itself, and certainly no village can survive in Dominica or anywhere in the Caribbean by itself. So they have some introspection to do from tonight, but I'm saying to them that we're prepared to engage them. We have to let bygones be bygones and look to the future.
Yeah, I'd like to address the shift away from the political conversation. It seems to me that all year round, every year, we are speaking politics. I mean, we're here now tonight reviewing the results. But how do you shift that conversation to productivity, to the projects that the government wants to put in place? And how do you include people who feel marginalized, who feel like they're being excluded from development projects? Are you going to find a way to engage? I note that more of the candidates are younger. You've got almost half of the candidates are female. Are you going to start to address the demographic that vote for you, not just through greater representation for their members of parliaments, but through more jobs for young people in particular, and for more representation for young women, and also for young men who are also, crying out for work?
Well, yes. I try to recruit people not necessarily because of the age or their gender. We recruit people based on their capacity and their commitment to the cause and their commitment to the country. And they happen to have 10 out of 21 women contesting or the last election for us, this election for us, and very young people. One is 23, the other is 26 or 27. So very young people who I'm hoping can bring to the table of decision making those perspectives. You understand? Those perspectives. So we saw how Dr. McIntyre, the Minister of Health, was able to bring the health issues to the fore and to overcome the pandemic. You know, we have another medical doctor coming in, you know, to bring that perspective that she has as well on health and health issues and to see how we can effect policy changes. And so what I'm hoping to do beyond just the members of parliament and the ministers. For example, we have an aging population. We have done a number of things for the population. Yes, we care. The allowance for 70 and over from January to 65 and over. Compassionate allowances for them and so on. But I believe that there's still some policy decisions that we can put in place to address issues confronting our senior citizens. And so I'll be putting in place an advisory group, and I'll be tapping on the expertise and experience of the lady who owns Facts, for example, to serve as a lead on an advisory panel to myself on what external policy initiatives that we can pursue to make life better and more comfortable for people, for senior citizens, especially those who are suffering from dementia and Parkinson's disease and you know, what can we do for them to make their remaining years on earth, notwithstanding their health challenge, to be exciting and memorable and enjoyable. You know, you also see us taking some very strong decisions where people with disabilities are concerned. We cannot be building structures in 2022 which do not deal with the issue of accessibility and access by people with disabilities. You know, we should not be doing that. And these things must be in clear legislation and stipulated, you know. So there are a number of softer things in life that we like to focus on, beyond just the heavy infrastructure, but to focus on some of the softer things, the human aspects of the policies that we like to advance to the benefit of the country.
Great. And another question for you is, I hate to harp on the election process itself, but do you feel that the aspersions about the integrity of the electoral process have been somewhat dispelled by this election and the behavior, not just of Dominicans, but the fact that there is a link always made between electoral reform and the fairness and freeness of elections?
I mean, putting all partisanship aside, I believe it is disingenuous on the part of any Dominican to be of the view that our elections are not free and fair. I mean, come on. You know, it is not fair commentary in our country. You know, everybody who wants to vote is voting in Dominica. There's no impediments to this. The process is independent. I don't get, as God is my witness, I don't get involved in the electoral process. You know, I spoke to the Chief Elections Officer for the first time since his appointment in this capacity a few months ago when I raised a concern with him in respect to a registering agent in one of the constituencies. I don't engage. If I am communicating with the chairman of the commission, I write for the president. If they want to see me, I allow them to see me. But I really don't get involved in the process at all. And I make the resources available to them that they need. So I mean, our elections have always been credible, free from fear and fair to all. And the will of the people have always been displayed in our elections. To say that the 6 elections which I have contested in Vekas were not free and fair can't make sense. And it can't be, you can't question only those that you've lost. You know, and this is where the argument gets questionable. If the elections, if elections are not free and fair, then why are you accepting the results where you're concerned when you win? But when others win, you have an issue. But it's the same process, it's the same system, same mechanism. You know, there's nothing different in Vegas than it is in Salisbury. And I think we have to stop misleading our supporters and misleading the public and, of course, the wider world. But these elections, I think, I can say without any fear of contradiction, were credible, were free, were fair, and the results reflect the will of the people. The people of Salisbury said they want the independent candidate of the choosing, they got that person. The people of Marigot said they want to go independent, and they elected Mr. Charles, and so forth. And as the leader of the party, I accept those results. These are the people who have been elected, and we shall treat them as such with no questions whatsoever.
Thank you, PM. Thank you, viewers and listeners, for you joining us on this broadcast. We're going to wrap up now. I'd like to thank Peter Wickham, very far away. You want to say something, Peter?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, sorry, I was doing another interview with a Jamaica station. I was anxious to hear what was happening in Dominica. I just want to take the opportunity to congratulate Prime Minister Skerritt for making history yet again. This is now a 6-term government. In all of my time, I've never seen a government elected 6 times, and Prime Minister Skerritt has done this. I think that he also dodged a bullet in relation to some changes that took place in Grenada that caused a very different outcome, and I think the political strategy has won. At the same time, I'm also buoyed by the fact that the developmental agenda that has been outlined for Dominica is clearly working and will be continued. I've been visiting Dominica for a few years, and I've been seeing slowly but surely the changes that have taken place. And I'm also really impressed by the resilience of the Dominican people, having lived through the hurricane and the recovery that has taken place, and the leaps and bounds that have been making are really impressive. I'm familiar, as PM said, with the issues on the ground and the concerns that some people have. And I do know that many Dominicans have developmental concerns, and I'm certainly happy to hear that these are being addressed. So I just want to take the opportunity to congratulate Prime Minister Skerritt and the new government, to wish him well. There are a number of new faces, there are a number of ladies in the lineup, and there are a number of younger people in the lineup. And I think that all augurs well for the future. So all the best, PM, and congratulations and good luck to you as you move forward.
Yeah. All right, so thank you, Dominica. Thank you to the rest of the Caribbean who are watching. And for those who want to get final counts, you can go to the electoral office site in Dominica, which is the electoraloffice.gov.dm. So that's electoraloffice.gov.dm. By tomorrow, hopefully, there should be updates on that site with all of the results. At present, the final count is 19-2 to the Dominica Labour Party. So wishing everyone well, and thank you very much.
Okay.